my name is Ange Elson. I'm one of the co-chairs here of the Community Alliance. I joined as the admin of and convener of the Ballarat Allies, which is a group of non-Indigenous and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are basically working towards reconciliation and doing things a little bit differently. So that's my interest in this space. I'm also from the LGBTQIA+ community, as you might have noticed from my stylish semi-fuzzy faux hawk. Kind of have a number of interests across groups that are not nominally represented in community spaces. So I would just like to kick off by acknowledging that the City of Ballarat traverses the traditional lands of the Wadawurrung and Dja Dja Wurrung peoples. I pay my respects to the ancestors. I also pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and any Aboriginal people here. I think it's with Rachel MUIR in the room. I just wanted to acknowledge also that Rachel is the first Aboriginal woman who is standing for City of Ballarat Council, and that is something that I think is, from my perspective in Ballarat Allies, is something that I'm incredibly proud to see. So Rachel, I acknowledge your mob and your ancestors, and I pay my respects to your elders past, present and emerging, including your mum, who I can see here in this forum. So just a little bit of procedure. As I said, I'm from the Ballarat Allies, but the Community Alliance basically represents some progressive organisations that operate in Ballarat who advocate generally on their own for a better Ballarat. Wanted to just quickly acknowledge that Tony and a number of others from these organisations thought it would be worthwhile us getting together as non-partisan grassroots local people to see how we might actually put forward an agenda. So at the moment, the Alliance is, as you know, Ballarat Allies, but the Ballarat Bicycle User Group, Public Transport Users Association, Ballarat Unions, Ballarat Climate Action Network, Ballarat Action Climate Co-op Youth Group, but also a number of individuals who are part of community groups like Friends of the Yarrawee, Friends of Black Hill, and others, including some of the young LGBTI groups that actually don't use Facebook very much, which makes a number of us here on the Alliance feel quite old. So I guess without further delay, I'd also like to introduce you to Tony and Sam, who are doing all the IT grunt work for this meeting. And so you'll see that microphones are muted. So Tony and Sam will be jumping in and out. And I might actually also throw to them occasionally in a kind of Iron Chef way, where I say, cross over to Tony for a question from the room. I also have an acquired brain injury, so if I get too muddled or lost, they'll jump in. But hopefully I'll be pretty clear. So we kind of want this to be a relaxed conversation. We've watched all of the other forums, and there's been a few of the gotcha moments, and things have gotten a little bit tense around timing and so forth. So we thought we would kick off with a 3-minute window for you just to have a bit of a chat around your commitment to making Ballarat an inclusive community. You don't have to cover all of those platforms and issues. You can choose a number of them. We'll ask the follow-up questions from those that you're interested in and those that we've seen in terms of the comments and questions across a number of forums that are of interest to us. We'll be using the responses from this forum in terms of our recommendations back to Alliance members and community members around our views around whether or not there's alignment or not. So without further ado, Bridget, I think you are up first. So over to you, 3 minutes.
Well, let me also pay my respects to our Aboriginal heritage here, to the Wadawurrung people, to leaders past, present, and importantly, the emerging leaders of the future. We thank them for our time on their land. In my day job, I'm the campus dean for Australian Catholic University. It's a wonderful job, and it's what brought me to Ballarat. And about 6 weeks after moving here, my daughter came to visit, and she looked at me and said, "You're not coming back to Sydney, are you, Mom?" And I said, "Not a chance." I fell in love with Ballarat. It's a wonderful, amazing city that has everything going for it. But my interactions with the council during my time as Dean of ACU haven't always been good. I've attended a lot of consultations where they've told us what they wanted, asked us our views, and then gone out with what they wanted to begin with. And this has happened repeatedly. And it seems that people's voices weren't being listened to, and if they were consulted, it wasn't always a genuine consultation. Now, that wasn't all of the councillors, and it wasn't just the councillors. It was some of the staff and officers too. But we're all quite aware that there is a fairly toxic culture and some big changes that needed to be made. The Ombudsman's report alone attests to that. And to their credit, they are starting to make those changes. But the next council that you elect becomes incredibly important, because that next council has to choose the CEO who will take the council forward. And so this becomes important. Is it a council that is going to genuinely listen to the views of the community? Is it a council that places the climate crisis and renewable energy and environmental sustainability as a priority? Is it a council with the strategic ability, the governance experience, and the experience to handle the post-COVID changes that we need to make, including finding jobs and attracting business and manufacturing? Are we going to tend to the roads and the rates and the rubbish? Are we going to make sure that our infrastructure keeps ahead of growth rather than lags behind it? Are we going to be able to work with state and federal government, no matter who is in charge of what party? And that's important. I bring the kind of experience that we need to this role, and I'm willing to give up my time for the people of Ballarat. But
30 seconds.
Besides all of my experience, I also care about people and social justice and put people first, which means I want to listen. I don't want to just say what I believe. I want to hear what you have to say. And I've spent the last couple of months asking people before I've gone out with what I think are the priorities. So I bring my empathy, I bring a fresh perspective, and I bring a lot of experience. And I'm willing to use that to serve the community.
Thank you. That's time. Just flicking into a couple of questions now. I think one of the things you've just spoken about is in and around engagement with community. How do you foresee that you'll engage with young people, for existence, or our aging population?
Look, I guess because I'm in higher education, I work with the 18 to 25-year-old group daily. But I think even younger than that, we need to have policies and procedures around that. But more importantly, we need to care what they say. I know there's a youth council, but we need to go beyond that. And we need to cover all age, gender, ethnicities. It should not be a homogenized council. In my work as chair of the Livability Project team for Committee for Ballarat, whose board I'm on, one of the things I kept saying is that while we're a member organization and need to represent the views of our members, livability is more than that. And we need to engage the views of the young people, the old people, the marginalized, the disadvantaged, and the people who don't normally get a voice. And it's that egalitarian approach which we really have to take as a council.
Councillors in this term have talked about governance and state control of projects. What do you see as your role in terms of advocating and or pivoting away from being tied to state government and making things happen in this community?
Look, I think what we do have to understand is what is the councillor's role, what is the officers or staff role, what is state responsible for, what is federal responsible for. I spent a good 15 years lobbying state and federal government on a bipartisan basis. So I was able to work with both sides on behalf of the universities I worked for. While I am a member of the Labour Party, and I'm proudly saying it because we've had too many, hashtag fake independence, I want the voters to know that I'm a member of the Labour Party. But the really great thing is, by law, my vote cannot be directed from outside influences. So my vote is my vote for the community, and my vote has to be what is in the best interests of Ballarat and South Ward. I'm self-funding my campaign as well, but we have to work together.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bridget. One last question. Does anyone from the viewers have any questions for Bridget while we're here?
There was a question about candidates saying which ward they're in. I just wanted to clarify that we're beginning with the South Ward candidates. So just like to say.
Correct. I guess finally, just the last question. How would you describe your relationship with the local Aboriginal community?
Great question. I've gotten to know Deanne Gilson quite well, and I work closely with our Jimbayar unit at ACU, which is about supporting Indigenous students through their studies. One of the things I've said is that I want to do more. As soon as I started my role in Ballarat, the first thing I asked for was cultural training so that I would have a better sensitivity to the local aspects. My great-grandmother is American Indian, and I didn't know that until recently, but I've always had an interest in multicultural affairs. My last role, I worked internationally across many cultures. And I think that I'm thrilled Rachel's running. I'm not thrilled she's running against me, but I'm thrilled she's running because I think we are a homogenized council. And
Yes.
while I can bring gender and age to bear, I can't bring ethnicity to bear because I'm about as lily white as they come. But I do care, and I care deeply for marginalized communities, for the Indigenous community, for those who don't have a voice.
Okay,
we must represent them all.
Just quickly, we did end up with a question for you, and it was, will you support the federal government changes to university structures?
Oh.
So it's a pretty personal one. If you can go very, very quickly.
Oh my God.
We've saved a bit of time from Des's absence, but we'd like to keep on track.
Anything I say now about that is going to get me in trouble at work. I have some disagreements with the federal government's approach to universities. I do not disagree, however, with them putting more money into supporting rural, regional, Indigenous, and marginalized students to get a higher education. But I have a personal philosophy that education is not just about university. Education comes in many forms, formal and informal, and there are different pathways for different people, and anything we can do to broaden that exposure to as many people in whatever pathway is right for them has my support.
Perfect. All right, thank you so much. We'll head to candidate Tracey Hargreaves. So if you need me to just repeat the intro, or are you right to go?
No, thank you, Ange. I think I've got a fair idea. So am I going from now?
Go!
Clock's on, right, cool, my clock's on as well. So I too would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of this land that we're on, so the Wadawurrung and the Dja Dja Wurrung people, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and definitely emerging. I thought I'd use my time to give a little bit of context to why I personally really resonate with this group, the Ballarat Community Alliance, and how I would try and bring that experience if I were to get on council. So I think I've got a fairly unique experience in the disability field particularly. I grew up with two parents who both worked in the disability field, looking after children with disabilities and also acquired brain injuries and that sort of thing. And so, I mean, a fair few years of primary school was spent actually living in a home where kids would be given respite care. So they'd come for a week or a weekend or whatever. And so I suppose my whole family grew up really just on a day-to-day basis around people with disabilities. And that was a really rich experience. And I think maybe just lit a bit of a spark in me to also just kind of resonate with other fields like, so I've gone on to work in disabilities myself and also teaching yoga and Pilates. So I eventually launched my own business, which I've been able to use as a platform to put out their messages of support to other, what you might call marginalised or minority groups. So we've done a lot of work around mental health. We've done a lot of work around fundraising for things like Share the Dignity and the MND, Big Freeze. I think we were the first business in Ballarat to tie ribbons to our fence for the Loud Fence movement, which is showing support to victims of childhood sexual abuse. So there's all of those kind of things that we really just like to put out a voice of support when we can. Every January 26th it comes up that we, and through the plebiscite, we try to use our social media and leverage, people that actually come on a daily basis to classes, and just to make everyone feel like they're welcome and loved and they belong there. So that's sort of from a professional perspective as well. I'm a fully independent, very brand new raw candidate. I haven't had any training in public speaking, as you can probably tell. But yeah, I'm just, in terms of the Indigenous community, I would love to do a lot more. I'm a big fan of artists like Baker Boy or the Numina Sisters, or there's such a rich artistic, you know, a lot of works going on out there that I am absolutely a big fan of myself. So there's a rich, you know, lots of things that you can learn yourself, but also I'd love to do more in getting involved. Is that close to 3 minutes?
Yep, that's about bang on. That's just under, but that's okay because we can fill this time with some really excellent questions. So this week I noticed that you were mansplained to just a tiny bitty bit.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the future is female in our house, in my household. And I've personally been really excited by the number of feminist male and female candidates that we've clearly got. I think that's very fair to say. Any reflections on what it will be like as an independent female councillor?
Yeah, look, I mean, part of the thing of running in the first place was really just to sort of model and maybe inspire some other girls and women out there as well to use their voices and to do things and not be afraid of failure. I think that often women are held to a higher standard sometimes. They have to, and it's the same with a lot of other minority type of groups. If they don't have as much power, there's that thing where they've got to work twice as hard for half of the credit. So I'm just a big fan of doing it. Like, who cares at the end of the day if you fail, if you stuff up, like, you pick yourself up and you go again. But I think there's such an important role that women have to play, especially since we are talking about things like childhood and maternal health and childcare, and even just facilities like playgrounds and footpaths, and all of that stuff really does have, you know, it's women that are doing a lot of that, accessing those things. So yeah.
That's awesome. Just thinking through some of our questions. Do you think councils have a really important role in ensuring older residents are not super socially isolated?
Definitely, so much. I mean, COVID's been challenging for absolutely everyone, but even more so, I think the oldies who have been stuck at home a bit more this year, maybe on their own, maybe disconnected from their communities. Someone sent me a message and I've dug a little bit into it. The situation with the RSL club at the moment is a little bit bleak. So they've been, you know, for whatever reasons, unable to be at the George anymore. And now they've really yet to find a home that they can use. I think they're in one of the golf clubs, and it sort of clashes with events, so they can't hold their meetings. And those sort of services and the senior citizens clubs are so important. Maybe they're not as trendy. Maybe the people that use them don't have as big a platform and voice to talk about these things and why they're important. But we're talking also about a generation that forged and built everything that we enjoy, you know, because of them. So yeah, it's a big deal.
Thank you. That's a great answer. So we talked very briefly you talked very briefly about your experience in disability so far. Would you be committed to pursuing the universal accessibility standards in all the new and amended housing and physical infrastructure that council's got, in terms of if it takes pursuit of, you know, planning regulations changing, etc.? Is that something you would be prepared to take up?
Yeah, I mean, like anything, there's going to be some struggle to get there. But if we're talking about things like wheelchair accessibility, like doors that are wide enough to get a wheelchair through, and I think there's probably some really great upcoming technology. So like retrofitting shops, maybe they can't afford to build the type of things that make it easily accessible, but there are like portable or, you know, things like that, if you like, that you can bring out and use when needed. So yeah, like, I mean, those barriers to entry for people are something we should definitely look at removing, you know.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the 6 minutes. Rachel MUIR, did you need me to just quickly brush up, or are you right to just get talking?
I think I might be right to get talking.
Nice, mate. Go for it.
So yeah, I would like to pay my respects to my elders, past, present and emerging, and pay my respects to all Aboriginal people in and around Ballarat. And I'd also like to pay my respects to all people of all cultures that call Ballarat home. I'm Looking at the Zoom group, it seems to me that we have a lot of the same people that have doubled up in these forums, so they're probably sick of hearing me talk. But I am independent candidate with no political backing. Yeah, and I was raised, born and brought up here in Ballarat with a single parent household. Proud Aboriginal history, heritage. I'm a proud mother of 2 young kids that attend primary school here in Ballarat. They inspire me every day to be active in the community. So what I see are the fights for me now. I don't want them to be the fights for them in the future, as well as the same as like other multicultural people here in Ballarat. We are seen as and classed as a minority or marginalised or disadvantaged. I'm quite advantaged. I have a job. I'm employed full time. So I don't find myself as disadvantaged as others that are seeking asylum or anything like that. So it's just words to me, but we seem to be classed as minorities, but I want the multicultural Aboriginal communities, everybody to be the minority of Ballarat, and for them to feel safe here in Ballarat, that we can have that voice. We, as an ex-KIAG member, Korea Engagement Action Group member, I have had my dealings with the council, and we have had many discussions, consultations, but consultations, as Bridget said before, consultations with council that have their own agenda, not with what they want to hear from the community. And it's the community voices that need to be heard. And I want to be a part of a council that listens, that has consultations with the community as far and wide, as from young kids to the aged, from the marginalised to the advantaged, you know, like I want to be a voice for everyone. But yeah.
Perfect.
Oh, sorry, go.
No, you go.
No, you're right.
No, I just wanted to ask you a few questions. January 26 is obviously something you've been really passionate about through the course of your work with KIAG and across community. You're one of the key people that helped us set up the Allies, which has been absolutely amazing. What do you see as an alternative to the day? Is there something that you think would bring community together that council could get behind?
I think that the Jan 26 debate is very largely discussed in Ballarat, and with the Allies, that was a surprise to me that there's so many people in the Ballarat area that are allies towards Aboriginal people on that date. Hence the big turnout for our dawn service this year, which to me, Jan 26 shouldn't be about a celebration, because it, to my people and to people that don't even are classed Australians, like they're asylum seekers, they're not Australians. Do they celebrate the day? Do they feel like they're welcomed? I don't think so. But for my people, it's like celebrating on Anzac Day or celebrating on Remembrance Day and stuff like that. It's very disrespectful. And I feel that we as a community haven't been heard on this subject, and Aboriginal people in general should be allowed to be heard on that subject.
Perfect. One of the other communities that you've been incredibly supportive of is my community. So I'd be really keen to hear what type of considerations you'd bring in and around relationships with LGBTQIA community.
You know what? I always think, why do we or other communities need to venture out to Melbourne to go and celebrate something? Let's have a massive chill out festival in Victoria Park and get everyone together and have a great celebration of the LGBTIQA plus community, because they're here. Why should they have to go to Melbourne to celebrate being them, you know? And same with Aboriginal people. Why do we have to go to Melbourne to celebrate on other days? Why can't we have that here in our own town?
Okay, and thank you for that. One final question from the chat. from John Webber. He says, "Hi Rachel, how can the council help people with affordable, secure housing? Thanks."
I think the council should look into putting all these affordable housings in all these new estates. Council buy some land, council build some houses. They're affordable houses, because the homeless rate in this town is disgusting. It's upsetting, it's disheartening, and those people could be in affordable housing with the support of council.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Rachel. Really appreciated your responses. And Jackson.
Yes. How's it going?
Really good, thanks. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So I was just about to turn myself off mute and realised that it already happened. Yeah, so shall I launch in?
You can.
All right, great. So there, I'm Jackson SNEP. I'm the Greens endorsed candidate for South Ward. And before I start, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Wadawurrung and Judjurrung people, and their elders past, present and emerging. So yeah, thanks for having me, Ange and Tony, and for putting on this candidate forum. I think Ballarat's a really progressive city on the whole, but unfortunately the outgoing council doesn't really reflect this. I'm running to hopefully bring a more younger and more progressive perspective to council. Growing up, my parents always showed me the value of community, of helping and supporting one another, and looking out for people in need. So that's what I'm really hoping to do if I get elected. I'll talk a bit quickly about my experience, both in terms of work and academia, but also, you know, personal life experience and what that will hopefully, you know, I can bring to the role. I've got a business degree and I started my career in the corporate space in audit and compliance. Yeah, it's just as exciting as you imagine it is.
Hey, some of us love a bit of governance and audit, don't you worry.
Oh, look, I mean, it's important and I learned a lot, and hopefully I can bring a lot of that to council if I'm elected, but I don't miss it. I'll tell you that. In 2014, I went and joined my family business, Welshman's Reef Vineyard, where I'm a winemaker and I co-manage the business with my father. And we run a social enterprise there called Big Hearted Wines, where we support grape farmers who can't sell their produce. And it's operated since 2011, and we've actually returned hundreds of thousands of dollars to farmers and saved hundreds of tons of grapes from going to waste in that time. And the places I've lived have also informed my ideas on what's important for a progressive and inclusive community. Growing up on my family's farm and now working on the land, I've seen the effects of climate change firsthand. That experience is one of the factors in my decision to run for council. Another experience was living for almost a year in the Netherlands and seeing how the Dutch do things differently. You know, for example, in social housing, active transport, recycling and other issues. And in regards to making Ballarat a more inclusive community, I've already made several commitments. I am, of course, a Greens candidate, and that means support for social justice and climate action. I've signed your Community Alliance's pledge, and that includes a whole range of things, including reconciliation, climate action, sustainability, better planning, and lots of things, really. It's pretty comprehensive. And I'm a full signatory to the Rainbow Alliance pledge, which means I fight for LGBTIQ inclusion and rights, and fight to end discrimination, march in our parades, things like that. So yeah, that's a number of the commitments I've made. Yeah, so that's me in a nutshell, really. Thanks, Anne.
Excellent. Throwing across to Tony.
Oh, okay.
Awesome, thank you. You mentioned cycling. Could you just talk more about cycling in Ballarat and how you support that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So cycling, I think we could use a lot more infrastructure. I know that a lot of people in Ballarat have really enjoyed and taken up cycling, particularly during lockdown. It's a great way to get around, keep fit, you know, not use the car, not have to deal with parking and all the associated issues. So I think council can do more to have more cycling lanes, cycling infrastructure, maybe even an awareness campaign to improve, you know, community attitudes to cyclists. Yeah, just generally facilities, I think we could go a long way to help and make it more accessible for all.
Okay, I've got a question here from Margarita Stevens. Hello, Dr. Stevens. Nice to see you here. State government is trying to stimulate jobs in region Victoria. What sort of new jobs do you think would be appropriate for Ballarat?
Oh, great question. So as a Green, I'm obviously pretty keen on green jobs and things like green manufacturing, green energy. You know, we do need stimulus and things like that to get Ballarat's economy back on track after lockdown and after this recession that we're in. And I think that we could really do a 2-for-1 here. So we could become a greener, more sustainable city. I think we could really be a home for green investment, bring more money to the city, and then again that grows jobs. So I really see that as being a win-win, us developing that green reputation.
That's perfect. One thing that I'm really interested in, and I say this as a Generation X individual, I have noticed a lot of the commentary around all the youngsters standing for government, for council election this time around. I feel like there's a balance to be had between experienced candidates, but also fresh ideas. And you're obviously somebody that's in that little bucket there. Any reflections from you around what that looks like from your perspective?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I really think there's not enough youth or younger representation. I mean, I'm not that young, I'll be 30 in a few months, but I think that there should be more youth representation, as I was saying. One stat that I've mentioned in a couple of these forums is that Victoria's a young place. About 45% of Victorians are aged under 35. And so we really need some more proportional representation on council to bring those youthful views to I think, bring a bit of progressiveness, quite frankly, to council, but to talk about what young people need, what young people are worried about. So yeah, that's something I hope to bring if I'm elected.
Excellent. We've had a few questions in the chat around gambling. I'm not sure if that's an area of interest or expertise at all for you. A comment passed to me yesterday was that with the advent of COVID, lots of poker machine venues have been basically emptied out. Is there something that you can see that you would be able to pursue or support around harm reduction, like reducing the hours that pokies operate, or working with schools to make sure that their connections from gaming to gambling are broken, and maybe creating other places for gamblers to go to help them fill their time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Any reflections on that? Yes.
So, I mean, I'm not a fan of gambling personally, and I think it can cause a lot of harm in our communities. I was quite pleased to see, quite honestly, that, yeah, gambling had gone right down during lockdown. And I think that there are a few things that we can do as a city, as a council, to do that. So, for example, Ballarat can put a cap on the number of electronic gambling machines in the municipality. So, you know, you can say, well, this is the number we're happy with, and no more. You know, you can't just keep on expanding and putting more machines out there, which does cause harm. And of course, I think education is the other big thing. So, as you suggested, you know, talking to schools, talking to communities, talking to at-risk groups to help them out to you know, explain the dangers and the effects and the ways of getting out of gambling addiction. So yeah, there's absolutely work that council can do there.
Okay, that draws to a close the 6 minutes for everybody. So we're just going to, I guess, ask a few additional questions from the chat, but also from our broader conversations. One of my priorities, of course, is making sure that women's voices get heard. There was an article recently around the difficulty of representation and ensuring things get built. So, for example, Mars Stadium has only just announced that there's women-friendly change rooms, and I can't believe that we live in a world where that's like a thing at the moment. That we wouldn't actually be provided for up front. So I'm interested in candidates' views. How about we work our way backwards from the list we started with, about what you will do to make sure that you send the elevator down to women in particular, if you do get in, and how that will look in terms of committees and connecting, you know, women of all ages into the decision-making processes and consultation processes.
All right, so that would be starting with me then, I suppose.
Yes, please.
All right, for sure. So Yes, I mean, I'm a feminist personally, and I think that there's a lot that council could do. I mean, for example, the Mars Stadium issue you're talking about, that's you know, that can be rectified with planning. So we could say that, you know, make sure that you have appropriate bathrooms, appropriate change room facilities, things like that, so that, you know, preferably gender neutral, I think would really be the way to go. So it's not men's or women's, it's just open. So things like that would really help. But yeah, just setting those attitudes and making sure that the culture within council is one of inclusiveness, one of support to women, and then including women and making sure women have their voices heard on issues that affect everyone. So things like public safety, things like childcare, I believe Tracey mentioned earlier, access to, things like that, which disproportionately affect women. So I think they should have a much larger say in those issues.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Rachel.
Coming from experience, I did play 2 years ago football in Ballarat, and we had to use male change rooms with urinals and no toilet seats. So that wasn't very nice for the women football. But I think the councillors, councillors, not me, I meant, we need to get out there and see what's out there in our areas. And we need to support women in sport, women change rooms, like to bring it all together, because there's so much out there. There's so much sport that's out there, and women are not put anywhere to the top of the list. Like Mars Stadium, that's beautiful and everything, right? But I played down at Golden Point down in the town there, and that was shocking. And other sporting facilities around town are not up to standards, and that's pretty poor.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. Tracey?
Yeah, so this is my jam. I love this question. Thank you. It was only this morning that I posted about the local hockey field, and they don't even have female change rooms, which is like bizarre to me. Like, there's been a really successful women's team, like multiple really successful women's teams running through that club for years. So I don't get how that even happens in the first place, but here we are. But look, I think it's really about creating opportunities for women and lifting women up. And you know, like, they can't have a voice unless they're given the chance as well. We have a current council that's only 1/3 female. It's not even 50-50 yet. Yeah. I mean, imagine how different it would look if it were the other way around, 6 women and 3 men. That'd kind of work for me, I think. But like, I'm all about just, creating opportunities. And I think it really does start quite young. I even noticed with my own children, I've got a 7- and an 8-year-old, that my daughter is already sort of responding to certain cultural pressures that aren't even, like, if you don't have, the lens to see these things, like my son probably doesn't, they don't even exist. And the tricky thing is that for women to really get up and grab hold of some power, someone else has got to give it up, unfortunately.
Yeah, good comment. And Bridget?
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, it's 2020. Why is this still an issue? It's ridiculous that we're still talking about this, that we seem to be going backwards from the gains that our bra-burning grandmothers made for us. I've been in higher ed most of my career. You can imagine the patriarchy that I've been pushing against. I think our sporting facilities absolutely have to have equitable change facilities. I was at the hockey facility the other day as well. They're asking for a second pitch to expand. What they did say is that they have separate male and female change facilities, but when there's a game on, the home and away team have to use those 2 facilities. So they don't become male or female anymore. They become unisex home and away, and the women's teams have to wait until the men's teams finish before they can go and change for their game. And that's just unacceptable. So I know there were grants for this from the federal government and from the state government, but this is just, it's 2020. This should be done. And council have to facilitate, advocate, work with state and federal, find grants, find partnerships, find ways so that this just, by 2024, when this next term is done, we can't be asking the same question again.
Agreed, that's great. One of the questions from the participants here is about cannabis as an industry and whether or not Ballarat ought be pursuing that for new and local jobs post-COVID. And obviously we've got lots of farmland around here and lots of expertise in small plot horticulture, etc. Any thoughts on that one? And we'll go back through, I guess, the list back the other way again, just to keep it nice and tidy.
Well, what kind of cannabis are we talking about here, Ange?
We're talking about the medicinal farmed cannabis.
Okay. If we're talking about the legal
just to be clear, yes,
if we're talking about the legal kind, you know, if we're talking about illegal, then no councillor can support it. Whether we want to or not doesn't matter.
Legal use of cannabis.
What we need to be looking at in this post-COVID recovery is supporting our existing small businesses so they don't go out of business. That is going to be essential and vital. And attracting any new industries, manufacturing, and businesses that will create jobs. If there's a case study to be made for that as an industry, then we need to seriously look at it. If there's a case study to be made for renewable energy as an industry, we need to look at it. If there's a case to be made for underwater basket weaving in scuba gear at the bottom of Lake Wendouree, we need to look at it. I'll volunteer, I have scuba gear. We need to look at anything that brings jobs and prosperity into this city in the post-COVID recovery. And that starts with supporting our existing businesses and moves on to attracting new industries, new manufacturing, and new small businesses.
Perfect, thank you. Tracey?
Unmute. Sorry, Ange, I thought you were done with us, so I was trying to type an answer to someone in the comments thing.
No, you've still got a little bit of time left. I'm going with free-falling, flowing questions until 4:20 when we welcome the next ward in. And we've also got a little bit of extra time because Des Hudson was an apology. So I just think we can cover some more questions and get some more info for you. So the question was around cannabis and whether or not as a legal industry, that's something that you think would be, we would be able to support in Ballarat.
Well, I mean, look, it's a tricky one because if we're talking about, like, if it was legal here and if there had been enough studies and enough evidence to prove, then I would be all for anything that is going to be beneficial for some people's health. The little bit I know about like CBD and the endocannabinoid system and all of that, I think it's a really helpful thing for some people with things like mental health and cancer treatments. And I mean, I wouldn't want to stand in the way of somebody else receiving a care or a therapeutic like that actually was really beneficial. I personally, think often the pharmaceutical industry has too much of a hand in a lot of things, perhaps, possibly. I mean, this is getting kind of bigger picture than maybe local council has much of a say in, but I am all for looking at all different types of treatment for individuals and allowing access. If we're getting in the way of something, that's because of a personal bias against it, I think that's doesn't really sit well with me. So yeah, does that answer enough?
Does, that's great. Rachel MUIR. Is Rach still here?
No comment. No, I'm only joking. No, I think that medicinal marijuana has its place in the health, like for the well-being and longevity of people's lives. So I don't know much.
Would you encourage local industry in terms of cannabis growers? Like, so if there was a medicinal marijuana industry here in Ballarat, is that something that you would get behind?
If it was policed very well and it was well looked after and not, tampered with by other people wanting to use marijuana. But do you know what I mean? Like, if it was looked after well and it was used for medicinal use only, and we could, I'd support that.
Perfect. And finally, Jackson.
Yeah, okay. Yes, so yes, one of the other things that hasn't actually been discussed is hemp. And you know that hemp can be eaten. You can put that in food legally these days. It's really healthy, it's really high in protein. And also hemp as a fiber, you know, you can make yourself hemp shirts and fabrics and what have you. It's way more sustainable than cotton, for example. Cotton uses huge amounts of water. So it's something that grows really well in Victoria, funnily enough. So that's something that we could pursue, I believe.
Excellent. Just flipping into... we haven't really touched very much on housing affordability and what that looks like here in Ballarat. There's a number of, we've probably got a minute each to go. We're basically in a position where there's lots and lots of empty houses around Ballarat, lots of empty hotel kinds of spaces and large scale properties. A number of them get left to be derelict and burned down. Do you see a role for council in kind of making sure that occupancy is improved and that people get better access to social housing?
Oh, sorry, there we are. Yes, so social housing, I think, is a big issue, for example, in Ballarat. There's not really enough social housing going around. Homelessness has already been discussed a bit here, so you know, we all agree, I think it's a big issue. And again, it's planning. It's one of those things where we can say, okay, well, let's allocate more space to social housing. Let's require more of developers, whether it be greenfield developments out in the fringes or whether it be infill development, that we have more social housing. And I think that's really important to have that mix, because, you know, we don't want to push people who are in social housing out to the fringes. You want to be able to have them in the city. You want to have them in different neighbourhoods, and so that we have you know, we don't have some sort of stratified society going on here. And have a really good blend of people from different backgrounds and different needs in our neighbourhoods.
That's a great answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel?
Yep. I think that we need to build, the City Council needs to build partnerships with existing agencies that create with these things like Uniting Care and Centre Care and places like that that have these housing affordable housing at the moment, but there is derelict houses out there that could be done up and could be given access to running water for people that need that affordable housing, because, and we shouldn't just segregate them and put them into, you know, one part of town, everywhere, because you never know when you might need it. Do you know what I mean?
Great answer. Really, loving the empathy there. And Tracey?
Thank you, Ange. Look, if I could just very much echo what Jackson and Rachel have said, and especially at Rachel's point there at the end. Like, I think it's too easy for us to sit back and think, you know, oh, I've got, you know, I'm sorted, so it's not a me issue. But it really could happen to anyone, the circumstance of finding yourself without a warm, safe house, you know, around you. So it's definitely important. And as Jackson said as well, I think it's really important to, the type of housing is, you know, not just putting people as far out as, you know, the end of Sebas, whereas all of the, you know, the food, what do you call it? The soup ban and the access to food and meals and sort of like, that's all happening in the CBD. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it has to be thoughtful, and affordable housing definitely is something we need to work on in Ballarat in general, I think.
Awesome. And finally, this will wrap us up. We'll hear from Bridget.
So one of the first things we need to do is get rid of the red tape for planning approvals for 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. These are urgently needed as emergency, short-term and long-term housing for people. The other thing we can do is build in requirements for developers to contribute to social housing as part of developing these large areas in the South and the West. Another thing, and I'm gonna say I can't take credit for this, it's not my own idea, but one of the residents in South Ward that I was talking to in the lead up to this campaign mentioned that we have a lot of disused warehouses, and could we possibly contact the owners and fit them out as short-term and emergency housing shelters instead of them sitting there vacant. Now, part of the problem with disused or abandoned houses or disused warehousing is they are private property, and you can't just go in and take it and use it. You have to get the permission of the owners or buy it back. But there are possibilities there for making offers on, or working with private developers to make offers on these privately owned places. But certainly large warehouses like the Masters, which is now being developed into something, could have been used with permission as short-term and emergency shelter. So there are things we can do. It is a crisis, and we have to be open to the fact that it's a crisis. We have to be willing to listen, and we have to be willing to act.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. That's a really great first run through from the South Ward candidates. I just want to, on behalf of the Alliance, wish you all the absolute very, very best. I have appreciated your generosity here with us this afternoon. It's been great. And stick around and pop into the comments if you would like.
Thanks a lot.
I'm going to cross back to Tony for a brief segue into an updated video from us, which is exciting.
If Sam has it on hand.
Hi, I'm Lucy, and My Better Ballarat is a place that engages with our rich history and heritage in a way that's sustainable, creative, and encourages wider community pride.
My name is Sissy Austin. I'm a Gunditjmara Kira Warrong Djapurrung woman. I live here on Wadawurrung country in Ballarat. A progressive Ballarat council, to me, looks like a council that allows for the voices of young people to be heard.
My name is Hazel, and I am a member of the Ballarat Action Climate Co-op, which is a local group of high school students who are concerned about climate change and are taking action.
A council that avoids tokenism, that really looks at dismantling oppressive structures and then rebuilding it with Aboriginal people leading on the rebuilding of those structures.
My name is Matt Bridie, and I live in Wendouree, and I'm passionate about riding bikes.
I'm Neil Hybrids. One of the major issues needs to be rebuilding council's capability to manage its environmental assets.
I'm Sally Nissing, and I live in Buninyong. What I'd like to see from Ballarat Council is a stronger commitment and stronger leadership in the area of climate change. And what I'd most like to see from Council is some leadership with the community on climate change.
Apparently I'm part of the minority. I'm not sure how I feel about that, because being a minority suggests maybe I'm of lesser value or not as important as those who are in the majority. I don't feel like I should be in the minority, because I work, I contribute, I pay my taxes, I use all the facilities, I have hopes, dreams, aspirations, views and opinions on what I want to see in my city. So I feel like an equal, and I feel I should be represented equally on the council.
Hi, I'm John.
Hi, I'm Kat. Personally, I'm really passionate and interested in the environment and ensuring that the environment remains in a good condition for future generations.
And something that I'm really passionate about is housing affordability and housing justice for all.
I'm Linda Genzer. I'm 78 years old, and I was a poker machine addict, and it almost ruined my life. It's been 14 years now since I've played the pokies or gambled. There are still times that I have nightmares about them. What will the candidates do to help people who are suffering from gambling harm to have something else to do and something to look forward to?
Thanks for that, Sam, and thank you to all the participants who helped us pull that together. You'll see that it's we are a broad church, not to steal a Liberal Party phrase, but we are a very wide set of interests in terms of the Alliance. And I think the thing that makes me enjoy working with the Alliance the most is that it's such a mixed group of people in terms of ages and interests, and everybody is just so dedicated to and committed to community and really wants to seize this opportunity to continue to work with council over the upcoming term. We just think it's not about necessarily being combative or any of those sorts of things, but really actually seizing the opportunity to harness citizens for the greater good. There's a lot of it happening, and I think it'll assist council in terms of progressing its actual agenda, and especially with the strategic plan refresh and other things that are on the horizon for a new council. It's never been a better time to harness the goodwill and energy of community. So thank you everybody for chipping into that video, in particular the last minute additions from the gambling crew. Really very worthwhile setting it out, I think, in terms of a vision. So again, we've got we're running a tiny bit late now on the central group. We are made up of some of the candidates from Central Ward. Essentially, I'll kick off for you all again and just describe what we're really interested in hearing from, following up from our survey. Basically, the Ballarat Community Alliance is a group of progressive community organisations that are advocating for a better Ballarat, and we've gathered together in a non-partisan way. So we come from all sorts of different political backgrounds and experiences. We're pretty grassroots, and so we've basically gathered a whole bunch of people who are really keen to make Ballarat a better place, and brought our voices together as a group to get more things done. I've personally found it incredibly beneficial, getting across issues that I'm not regularly joined up with, and sharing lots of ideas to kind of help our impact increase. So far in the Alliance, we've got Ballarat Allies, of which I'm the admin. We've got Ballarat Bicycle User Group, Public Transport Users Group, Ballarat Unions, Ballarat Climate Action Network, and the Ballarat Action Climate Co-op Youth Group. We also have a range of other people's, Friends of Yarrawee, Friends of Black Hill, and a range of other groups of people who are interested, including the young LGBTQIA group that sits on Discord, which is something that as a Gen Xer I am not really very across, but has a huge number of participants. So we'll work it the same way as we did the first group of candidates. Give you 3 minutes just to have a quick chat about how you'll use your experience and what your commitment is to making Ballarat an inclusive community. We don't expect you to speak about every single part of your platform, but our issues are broad, ranging from reconciliation to gender equity, housing affordability, disability rights, gambling harm reduction, etc. So you can speak across all of those issues, or you can narrow it down to a number of areas of your own interest, and then we'll ask you some questions related to what you're covering off on, as well as from the group around from the chat, as well as from bits and pieces that we left off our already extremely long questionnaire. All right, so we'll get started with Kumuda.
Yes.
Wonderful. Hi, pleased to meet you, Kumuda.
Yes, so lovely to meet you, and I've really been looking forward to this forum. Really, yeah, I just think this is such an awesome group and way to kind of bring everyone together, every progressive group together. So just first though, I want to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the country that we meet on, the Wadawurrung and the Dja Dja Wurrung people. And Rachel, I want to pay my respects to your mob as well. You know, I feel incredibly, I've just only recently started working with traditional owner groups across Victoria in natural resource management, and I feel incredibly honoured to be able to, you know, kind of experience some of the knowledge that different groups have shared with me. And working on reconciliation is definitely going to be a priority. I guess look, one of the reasons I started running, I put my hand up to run, was because I have been increasingly kind of distressed about the really big issues we face, the main one being climate change. That's sort of the past 5 years of my, I used to be an academic, and the past 5 years of that career I spent at researching climate change, and particularly looking at how it impacted communities. So I looked at things like water security on the ground in local communities. I looked at food security. And I guess, you know, I became really, really depressed about where things were heading. And then one day my husband said to me, he was like, well, you know, get involved, like put your hand up. And, you know, I'm a bit of an introvert, so it took me a while to sort of, you know, look around at, you know, the groups in Ballarat, and I didn't feel confident reaching out. But then this opportunity came up, and I just thought, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm a member of the Labor Party, and I'm an endorsed Labor candidate, and really, you know, I'm funding my own campaign. I'm relying on volunteers to help letterbox, but it speaks to my values, and those values are, you know, they're working class values. I grew up with a single mum. She's a teacher. You know, we went to every single rally as Geoff Kennett was trying to shut down schools across the state, and I saw the absolute devastation. Another Gen Xer here, by the way. You know, I saw the absolute devastation that caused when changes are made that don't respect working people. And I guess that for me, that's kind of the core of my values and my ethos is you put working people first. You look at how policies impact working people. And I guess in the few seconds I've got left is really importantly, to be inclusive, we need to talk to everyone else. You know, I'm a white, you know, cisgendered woman, I'm heterosexual, you know, I don't live with a disability, I live with an anxiety disorder, but, you know, like we need to reach out to all of the communities, because you are the experts on how we can actually make our city inclusive. And so for me, that'll be an absolute priority. I think you're on mute, Ange, sorry. Sorry, Ange, I think you're on mute still.
All right. I'm just asking you to unmute right now, Ange. There you go.
It kept pressing and then it kept coming back up. Sorry, everybody. That's hilarious. So just a question from the chat is, do you support all new estates having a portion of social housing?
Absolutely. I think this is fundamental. And you know, like one of the coolest things that you can do as a councillor in this area is that any new development or any new land that the council purchases, you can actually set aside a quota for social housing. So I know we do that with green space, and I think that's absolutely fundamental. And you know, I would like to see that kind of portion of green space increased, and we should absolutely be doing it with social housing as well. I think there are other tools council can use for social housing. You know, we can lobby state and federal government. I think it might have been Rachel, I can't remember who mentioned, but actually partnering with, it was Rachel, partnering with organisations like Centrecare and Anglicare who actually work in that space and leveraging the kind of combined work that we can do together. I think this is a really, really powerful thing that local councils can actually start to have an impact on.
Perfect. So obviously you've worked a little bit in climate change. How pressing an issue do you think it is? Council's declared a climate emergency, but do you see actions that can be taken? I mean, sometimes we see these pledges as tokenistic. What do you think are the most pressing changes that we need to address at this point?
Yeah, so look, it is pressing. It's an emergency. I think that word captures exactly what it is. I think we should be doing a couple of things. I think we should take a two-pronged approach. One is that we should be looking at mitigation, and Belinda has done an extraordinary amount of work in actually putting that at the forefront of what Ballarat City Council has done. And I know she's, you know, had some support on that, but there's also been a bit of, you know, anyway, I would love to see a council that is fully behind that. So I think mitigation is really important, reducing emissions, bringing in renewable energy, looking at how we can reduce our emissions as a city, looking at waste to energy and recycling. I guess one of the things I would love to see council do is develop a really comprehensive climate adaptation plan though. And that then looks at, okay, well, these changes are already here. Like, what have we already locked in, not just for now, but for the next, 10, 20, 50 years? And as a city, how are we actually going to make sure that we can protect the health of people, protect the health of the most vulnerable? How many homes that elderly residents live in, or people with health problems, have an air conditioner, and can they afford to run that air conditioner? Is there so things like that. So not just looking at the, that one side. I think we have to be looking at how we're actually going to protect people, and build, a big part of that is building community resilience. If we're going to get through this, we have to work together as a community.
Yeah, it's a nice segue to a question from Dr. Stevens, which is, how do you feel about the push for new gas fracking? And if the ALP supports this, will you support new gas fields in our district?
Absolutely not. Look, it makes me feel ill when we talk about, opening up our land for gas fracking. I've seen, you look at the absolute devastation it's caused in countries like America, particularly to groundwater and to people's health. And look, within the Labor Party, I'm on the Victorian executive of the Labor Environment Action Network. And what we do is we work really hard within the party to try and push for, strong environmental and climate policies. And again, as a local councillor, I will vote always to put the needs of the community first, and that is something that I would never vote to support.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Another question here, which is sort of segues neatly back into a more practical approach, which is sustainable development is a mixture of infill mixed with residential development, which with Ballarat's predicted growth, will you hold developers to account?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think, I think there's a rush to develop and grow and kind of expand. And I think that often we forget all of the things that need to be taken care of when you're developing really, really quickly and when your population is growing. And that is sustainable development. And I don't really like the word sustainable. I think we should be thriving and regenerative. And I think there are all of these better descriptions. Sustainable is kind of like, just keep it going. But I think what we should be doing is alongside protecting our heritage, our built heritage in the city, I think we should be looking at infill within the city. I think that, those buildings should be designed along the absolute, world-class best principles in terms of sustainable design, passive energy. I think, there are some extraordinary examples around the world where architects and designers are doing really innovative stuff. We should be tapping into that. We should be holding all developers account to saying, if you want to build in our city, then you have to meet all of these incredibly high standards.
That's perfect. Just finally, question earlier on hemp industries and medicinal cannabis as something to grow in Ballarat, grow both in fields, but also grow as businesses. Any thoughts on that before we hand over?
Yeah, so the medicinal cannabis industry, I know it's been legalised. So I think, anything that's going to bring jobs to Ballarat. I know that I saw Ellen mentioning that the hemp industry, is kind of on the verge of booming. I think that absolutely what was said about, it's way more sustainable than cotton. It can be used as fibre, it can be used as food. It's got really, really versatile uses. I think I would have to look into it a lot more. It's definitely not something I know much about, but if it kind of meets all of those criteria, then yeah, I think it would be a fantastic thing to look into in more detail.
Perfect, thank you. Across to Geoff Howard now. How are you, sir? It's been a long time.
Yes, there I am I?
You are.
Okay, terrific. Look, it's great to join with you all this afternoon. And I'd like to, of course, start by paying my respect to the traditional owners of the land, both the Wathaurong people, and I think I'm on Judge Arung land at the moment because I'm at my farm in Hepburnshire. I want to congratulate you for developing the Community Alliance network. I think it represents great opportunity. I'm a little bit worried though, the fact that there are, well, there's only one Liberal, Grant is here, I think, this afternoon, but the Liberals haven't joined us, and I think that must be because they fear this is a radical leftist group. And so for that reason, I'm wearing my Bob Marley Legend T-shirt this afternoon to be part of the spirit of the radical leftist group that you are. And of course, I'm joking in saying that because so much of what you say is just standard progressive behaviour that we need to progress. It is ridiculous that we're talking about a number of these issues in 2020. Just a little bit more about myself. Many of you will know that by now, perhaps you know that I came to Ballarat to live in the 1980s and was a science teacher to start off with. And early in my days here, I joined a lot of community groups in Ballarat and found it a terrific place to live. I also joined the Labor Party early on because I have that sense of commitment to equality and what I believe are Labor values, and felt that I wanted to represent my community, of course that led me to stand for council in 1989, and I had 3 terms on council then, which I really enjoyed. Learned so much about Ballarat as an overall city and the range of volunteer organisations, the range of community members we have. What a fantastic place. And as people know, I turned my attentions to the Kennett Liberal government in 1999 and was elected to Parliament representing Ballarat East then, and had 5 terms in the state government, which again I learned so much from, but I also believe as part of the Brax, Brumby and Andrews governments, I was able to contribute so much back to our community, to work with community groups to enhance our schools, hospitals, so many facilities. And then last year I thought I'd retired and I backpacked around Morocco. I even did go to Jamaica last year and met a bunch of Rusties there and had an interesting time. But I've come back and continue to want to live in Ballarat, be part of our community, but I've been concerned about a number of issues in Ballarat and thought maybe I should put myself forward to stand for council again. There's a lot of issues that I think I can help to address.
Beautiful.
Just talking about a few of those, we've talked about Australia Day. I remember back in 1990 on council, then that's when Australia Day, it was raised that it should be celebrated on the day rather than on the long weekend, which was the case before then. And the councillors were quite horrified when I said, I don't believe we should be celebrating Australia Day on the 26th of January at all. The sooner we can recognise that people are feeling hurt, the Aboriginal community are feeling hurt on that day, we need to find a day when all Australians can celebrate together. Is that the end
Beautiful.
of my 3 and you're wanting to ask?
That's your 3, and I'm going to hand over to Tony.
Okay.
Geoff, thank you so much for joining us. Just with your experience, could you comment on like what you do different with the last council that was in?
Oh, well, I suppose the first issues is to get the administration and the culture of the organisation right. And for the ratepayers and residents, what that really means is that when they ring up with issues, they know they're going to get those responded to quickly and positively. They know that if they want to raise issues, have concerns, that their voices are going to be heard. And I think they also want to know that the councillors are going to get on and do their job properly, delivering projects that are really in the community interest, working cohesively as a group, and I think I can help all of that happen.
Beautiful. Just curious about how you think you'll go about building relationships with some of the communities that we are representing here in terms of describing your relationship with Aboriginal community and LGBTQIA+ community as it stands now, and how you think you'll bring their voices to council.
Oh, look, part of my time in public life is that I've enjoyed working with people across all communities. My Labor commitment is that I particularly want to see people who feel disadvantaged having a voice, and with moving forward on any of the issues which include either people who see themselves in minority groups or not necessarily even minority groups. They just need to, first of all, be brought into the conversation about what's going wrong for them, where is this city not meeting their needs, and following through with that discussion to come to some solutions that will see that the city addresses those. Because I believe that our city is a great city, but it's not inclusive of everyone, or at least I know that a number of people don't feel included, don't feel valued, and I want to see this as Ballarat as a city where, and certainly my approach is always to be approachable and to talk with people, to want them to contact me, to let me know if there's issues that we could be doing better, and to draw them into working together to find a solution.
Beautiful. So you're in the Central Ward, and so I'm really keen to hear what you think of Ballarat's nightlife and creative industries. There's, a whole lot of barriers happening at the moment, lots of empty shop fronts. There's been, pop-up art displays and other such things. How do you think you'd go about re-establishing and supporting those arts communities and diverse communities to really kind of light Ballarat back up post-COVID?
Oh, look, I reckon there are going to be so many opportunities post-COVID. We do know that, yes, there are lots of shops that are empty, and sadly that's an issue we really need to work seriously to address. How the city centre can compete with the Telecom town centres, the Stocklands and other shopping centres is going to be a challenge, and so we need to find ways of ensuring all of those shop fronts don't sit vacant. There have been a number of novel opportunities put forward by the arts community, and they need to be taken up. Obviously we need to work with the owners of those stores to find ways of ensuring that they do get used, and in terms of the nightlife, while I'm not a big partaker of nightlife perhaps in Ballarat, certainly I love the restaurant culture from time to time, but my kids are, well, they're in their later teens, and of course I did in my past enjoy Ballarat's nightlife, but we need to build Ballarat. We have historically had a terrific arts culture in Ballarat. It's still there. We've got so many talented people. There are opportunities, and we need to continue to see opportunities for those art communities to thrive. We do have had a great history of community festivals, and we need to continue to promote those and redevelop those over the coming year. But I think that's going to happen very easily because there will be so much enthusiasm for people to get out, for people from Melbourne to come up to Ballarat, and so on. And so we're well situated to really start that off again.
Great. Thanks so much, Geoff. I'm going to hand over to Mark Harris.
Hi there. I've lost you, Andrew. I can't hear.
Are you're on, Mark?
Oh, Tony. Yep. I've got you there. I got called into work, so I got stuck in my car, so I was very happy it was a bit late. Have you got me there?
And just dropped off.
We're just interested to hear about how.
And just dropped off there. So I'll just jump in. So we just wanted to know how we use your experience and what is your commitment
for Ballarat's
inclusive community. Sorry about that. We've got some
no problems at all. Look, a bit like Geoff, it's probably best just to say who I am, and I think you sort of ascertain where you're coming from and what's important. And firstly, I'd also like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Wadawurrung community who the traditional custodians of our beautiful Central Ward, and to all First Nations people who are with us. But for myself, I was born and bred in Ballarat, went to Mount Pleasant Primary School. It was a tough school at the time, to be frank. It had suffered any gentrification whatsoever at that stage. I subsequently went to Melbourne Uni, did medicine, worked mainly in Ballarat, and as such, you'd think a paragon of white male Celtic virtue, really. It's somewhat an isolating existence from people who can struggle, and probably at first blush, it wouldn't be unreasonable to think that that's where I come from. But the reality is, I guess, my job, I've always worked in emergency departments, both Metro in Ballarat, and you do see people doing it hard. You can't help but know what the community's struggling with. Other parts of my job, when I worked with the Flying Doctor Service, I worked in Nanjara land and Pintabee land in the centre of Australia. I saw firsthand the other end of stolen generations. It was still going on. You had a flux of people unsupported going to Kalgoorlie and Perth. It remains a sore, I guess, in Australia's soul, but it's still not quite right. I guess I've seen too women giving birth, having to suffer the shame of a male like me being the point of care. I've worked with men too on initiation issues and men's business, and again, it showed that we're two nations apart that have to be reconciled.
So just one more minute.
Yeah, I guess work I've done with defence as well too, which is overseas, and again, we're struggling First Nations communities in Timor and Bougainville and like. Look, what's important to me, I guess, is people to feel included. I don't want anyone on the outside. I think I suppose I get upset about particularly young people. I mean, if with any sort of diversity, but feeling outside, the general community, I think is appalling. And I think it's just those sort of things do trigger me a bit. But again, I mean, I am what I am, and I don't suffer. When it's all said and done, and it's very hard for me to say that I can feel for every community, every diversity that we've got.
So I think that's probably a good segue into my first question, which is how do you plan to go about engaging Koori community? For example, here, how would you rate your relationship with elders from across custodians and also the broader Ballarat community, and also anything around maybe engaging with young people and also engaging with the LGBTQIA+ community?
Yeah. Look, I think I suppose personally I'd probably have a good relationship with a whole lot of people because I would meet them even the job of councillor, which I did in the last term. However, look, I think we do have problems. I think a lot of things we can have is death by committee, and a council does that. It does some wonderful work within its committee, but it's a time to mix it up. It's time to look at, if you've got other committees, that's where you want to see the face of diversity, not pigeonholed within that single dynamic. So I think that's what we could do better. You really want to be looking around at the Avenue of Honour Committee and seeing diversity. You want to be looking at the art gallery and see diversity. So those sort of things I think what we need to change.
Excellent. One of the questions that other candidates have been asked is around the commitment to social housing and actually holding developers to account for what happens in that. Is that something that you're keen to pursue?
Yeah, like even with the COVID stuff, I did with the COVID emergency, went down to Flemington Towers for the medical response, and it's just social housing is rubbish in Victoria, and maybe it spurred us on to think about it, even that part of that conversation. But it's got to be, the bottom line is it's just got to be good. We've got to have good social housing, and it's got to be spread round. And this idea for getting let's get a cheap area of Ballarat and have it largely social housing, and let's make that housing poor, has surely got to be something out of another century. So I think we've got to work well on that. You see in Melbourne, the best outcomes, particularly in social housing, is when the people put social housing in places like Brighton, which have good supported communities, and even the towers that have got left in that area are well supported. So you've got to look to those sort of things.
Beautiful. In terms of climate change, you're part of the council that has committed to the climate emergency. What are some of the key priorities you think fall out of that in terms of actual boots on the ground?
Yeah, I think I like two things. Look, and I thank Belinda for bringing it to council. I certainly voted for it, but in reality, I'd think of doing it. And you sometimes get picky now. You know, so for 4 years after the event, did we have the metrics right for it? Is, you know, carbon neutrality, you know, even the right number for a council? Should we be doing better? You know, we're not a smelter, but we do waste, and we put a lot of lights on. So maybe it is the right place. But I think the next thing is how much can we husband a whole community, whole Ballarat, to a sort of a carbon neutrality or a properly metric dynamic for, you know, which we really must try to achieve. So I'd be interested in the next council trying to get into that and trying to get into the science around it and making it meaningful.
That's beautiful. What a great spot to start. And speaking of, the lovely Belinda Coates, time for your 3 minutes.
All good. Okay, thanks, Ange, and thanks everyone. It's really nice to listen to everyone. So hi everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians, also the Wadawurrung people, and pay respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and acknowledge that we've still got a long way to go in terms of truth telling. So to tell you a little bit about me, some of you might know, I'm currently Deputy Mayor and I've been a councillor for 8 years. I'm a social worker, so inclusion and equity are deeply embedded in my DNA and everything I do. So social wellbeing and environmental wellbeing are the values and principles that inform everything I've advocated for. And I think what I've demonstrated time and time again is that I'm committed to that, and I'm persistent and consistent, and I want to see City of Ballarat walking the talk on all of the progressive issues, basically. So every plan, every strategy, every policy, every action plan that comes before us, I've been able to advocate on. I haven't always been successful, and I haven't always had the political support on all of the issues that I've put forward, but I think the first step in getting an inclusion on the agenda is really listening deeply to the community as well. So I have had the privilege of chairing a number of the community committees of council, like the Disability Advisory Committee, the Intercultural Advisory Committee, and also co-chairing the Koori Engagement Action Group. I've listened deeply, and I will continue to if I'm re-elected. Some of the progressive issues I've had success on is getting a sustainable transport strategy and action plan up, gender equity strategy, active women and girls plan, and working with the community to get and deliver an inclusive play space, for example. Some of the things that are still high on my agenda are, of course, pushing harder on climate action and really walking the talk. And to get support for these issues, you really do need the political support. So look, to be really honest, mostly being the lone progressive councillor for 2 terms. So getting up the number of initiatives I have has been good, but I know we've got a lot further to go. I'd commit to push for a per capita active transport spend, which includes universal access as well. So when you improve things like walking infrastructure, that actually, and you have a universal access lens that benefits everyone. I would like to see some really, really deep and inclusive work done with our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community around local treaty process. And in talking to Lydia Thorpe, at the state level, she has a local government background and really believes that local councils are incredibly well placed to do that deep community work around that. I'd love to see better advocacy on some of those issues that have been close to my heart, like gambling harm and pokies harm advocacy, refugee and asylum seeker advocacy, and also stepping up our social housing action. The groundwork is done, and I agree with all of the discussion that's happened, that there's a lot of opportunity there. You can really build that into the planning scheme, that requirement to push developers harder.
Perfect. I do see you around town on your bike, and our Alliance fellow, one of my favourite people in the world now that I've met him, is not here. Just some reflections on bike paths, bike safety, and the separation lanes, and making sure that investment actually goes into making sure that cyclists are safe in Ballarat, and that becomes part of our DNA here in this city.
Absolutely, that's the plan. That's completely the plan, and the intention of the cycling action plan really spells out the case for why you have separated lanes, and it identifies a route and network across the entire city where the routes would go for separated cycling paths. So ideally, you would have, and this is in the action plan, a separated cycling path within around 500 metres, so similar to a bus stop of 90% of the households in Ballarat. And yeah, it's a no-brainer. It has health, environmental and even economic benefits for the city.
You've been a massive advocate for people with disability here in the city. Just a final question on the type of infrastructure and the commitment to the universal standards of design.
Absolutely. We've been so fortunate to have a really passionate disability advisory committee, and they have pushed really, really hard to ensure that we can really get that into the culture and, as you said, like the DNA of the organisation. So that's embedded into every new project, every new development, everything that City of Ballarat builds. Again, it's one of the things we just really need to walk the talk on, and I'm really pleased to see it in the integrated transport strategy, that commitment to universal design there. So when you think about making footpaths and connections like that more accessible, it assists people with disabilities, an ageing population, parents with children in prams. It benefits everyone.
Awesome, thank you. I'm getting a lot of statements in the comments around being good at broad and compassionate consultation. People have reflected a lot. I'm just going to potentially pass back through on just a quick question around governance in the city. What do you think your role is in terms of strengthening council governance?
As in back to me?
Yep, start back to you and then we'll head back through the list.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. So we need to continue to raise the bar on the governance of the organisation. So having councillors that fully understand the role and are prepared to hold each other and the organisation to account, to ask the right questions and to be informed around all aspects of the organisation. So whether it's the financials, how project delivery frameworks are done, how plans and strategies are being delivered on and measured, what you measure, you actually do. So is the organisation walking the talk on everything, the values, the principles, the plans, and yeah, ticking all the boxes.
Great answer. Mark Harris.
Yep.
Just in terms of governance, what you see as your role in terms of strengthening governance of the City of Ballarat?
Yeah, we've got a bit of a way to go in as much as we've still got to get a senior management team organised, and some of those are sort of fundamental building blocks to get a good governance. but even as Belinda said, the true good governance is when you have, I guess, a proper consultation dynamic going, and we need evidence-based consultation that we can get ideas from community, validate them, work on projects to solve those problems, and then again ask for community validation to do it. So simple sequencing like that will sort of deliver the best type of governance that we can have. It does help to have a good work together too.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for that. Geoff Howard, any thoughts on that?
Well, look, I agree with what Belinda and Mark have said. Essentially, it is a matter of getting around the table or wherever is appropriate to talk with people about the issues they want to develop and to work together to find those solutions. I'm not really sure what much more can be said. I think it's been said pretty well by the other two.
Yep. And finally, wrapping up with Kumuda. Any thoughts on the governance and improving it at the city?
Yeah, look, I agree with what's been said. I just think that, we have to be able to work collaboratively. And I think, I mean, Belinda, I think we would probably agree on an awful lot. I think that, having more progressive voices on council would be amazing. But the reality is there's always going to be people who have different perspectives, who come from different political backgrounds, different ideologies. And I guess the great thing about that is that you can get a diversity of voices and you can, sort of argue and debate through the nitty-gritty stuff and come up with creative solutions. I guess for me, though, is that, you want that to be done respectfully. And you want that to set the culture then for the rest of the council. I know, and particularly for the new council, that's going to be fundamental in who they choose as the new CEO and what kind of values they want that CEO to bring to the organisation.
Perfect. Thank you. So I've run us out of time. My apologies to everybody. But thank you so much to the Central Ward candidates. I wish you, on behalf of the Alliance, all the very best as the campaign draws to a close. Thank you so much for your time. Feel free to hang around in the background and answer questions in the chat. We will keep, absolutely feel free to continue to contribute in that way. But I think we'll best push on now into North Ward, which has a whole bunch of people waiting. So thank you so much, North Ward candidates. Apologies again for running late. Jay, if we could please kick off with you, 3 minutes on, just to quickly refresh, 3 minutes on our approach is basically, we just would love to hear about how you'll use your experience and your and what your commitment is to making Ballarat a more inclusive community.
Thanks, Ange. Before I speak, I do want to acknowledge the traditional custodians, the Wadawurrung people, and pay my respects to elders past and present. I also want to acknowledge that this land was never ceded and that needs to be addressed. A little bit about my experience, I think, would be good to highlight for those that don't know me. I grew up across rural and regional Victoria. I spent most of my formative years in a small town called Mallacoota. You may have heard of it, thanks to the bushfires this year. It is a beautiful place that was at risk quite severely, and my parents actually still live there, my mum. My mum had me when she was 17 and my little brother when she was 19. And she raised us for most of my life as a single parent. And I think that really shaped sort of who I am. We moved around a lot. I think we moved, I counted it once, I moved 23 times before the age of 18. And we struggled a lot financially. Growing up taught me a lot about social justice and the importance of being able to lift people up and the focus on people and community. And it's still something that I'm very passionate about today. I do have an arts background. I went to university. I was the first one in my family to finish high school, actually, and then the first to go to university. I moved to Melbourne, went into drama school, and so I have quite an extensive sort of arts background. I now work as a union organiser in the union movement, and I have done so for 13 years. And I'm passionate about that because my role is about giving people a voice, going in, listening to them, and acknowledging that I don't have all of the answers. I don't have a magic wand to make things better. But when we get people together and when we get workers together, and to be honest, this translates to a lot of different groups together to talk about the issues and we talk about the solutions collectively, we're a lot stronger to move towards those solutions. So that's kind of a little bit about my politics. I'm not sure if that's on time.
That's perfect. You're under time, so we're going to pound you with questions now. You'll regret that. Handing over to Sam.
Hi, Jay. Thanks for coming along this afternoon. You obviously have worked as a union leader for quite some time, and I believe you still work as a union leader, or you're on leave. Is that right? Or you're running for elections?
No, I'm not on leave. So I'm working from home, as many of us are during COVID, and I'm an organiser rather than a leader.
Right.
We have leaders, and my job's to work with them.
Great. So obviously you would have signed the ASU pledge, and would you ever consider privatising council services?
Absolutely not. I think privatisation is never good for the consumer. It's never good for those people who rely on public services. I think I'm all about people before profit. I think that is really important. I think that when you privatise services, they become less accessible to the community. And accessibility is very important to me.
And I have another quick one. So you've worked with our local LGBTIQ festival here in Ballarat. What would your priorities be as a councillor for the LGBTQIA+ community?
Good question. I do have some plans if I was to be elected. I think the first thing that many other councils do that we don't do in Ballarat is actually have an advisory committee of LGBTI people, whether that's leaders or just ordinary people who are passionate about the community, and then getting them together to talk about the issues. I know, as a director of Ballarat Frolic Festival, that our engagement with council has been up and down in the past, that we kind of weren't taken seriously to begin with, and we were kind of pushed aside, which didn't feel great, to be honest. And I know that, other councils, because it's not rocket science here, we can look at what other areas are doing. An LGBTI action plan, I think, needs to be a priority. So what way is the council going to engage with the community? And one of the things that Frolic has talked about for a long time is a small thing that in the council welcome packs that new residents receive, there's actually nothing in there at all about the LGBTI community. And we know now from hard data from a report from a couple of weeks ago that we have the 5th largest LGBTIQA population by a local government area in the state. It's sitting just under 10%, and that data is from 2017. And I can say since then, personally, I know of many people who have contacted me and said, we're thinking of moving to Ballarat, or we are moving to Ballarat. What's the community like? And I always say community in Ballarat is very welcoming and very positive, and I've found that to be the case.
Thanks, Jay. I'll throw it back to Ange.
Thanks. Councillor Moloney, up for your reflections on our inclusive community.
Right, hopefully I've unmuted okay now, so I think I need a permission at your end to unmute, so I think we're there now.
Good.
All right, well, g'day.
Good to go.
Okay, cool. All right, well, first of all, hello, awesome people. Good to see you all. Hang in there. It's been, what, 2 and a bit hours or something, so we're getting there. And I don't know if there's a huge amount left for me to say, but like everyone else, I'll kick off by acknowledging the traditional custodians of our land, the awesome and deadly Wadawurrung people, and also the Dja Dja Wurrung people who make up the northern part of our municipality as well. And that's a big part of my ward up to the north. I sort of feel like, how do I say this? We pay a bit of lip service just by saying that. And especially when you sort of go along to speeches sometimes and you sort of hear everyone make the same acknowledgement. One of the things I'd love to do if I'm back on council is to work with the Wadawurrung people and sort of see if there's a sort of a cool way where through traditional language we can have like secondary speakers and all that make that same sort of acknowledgement in Wadawurrung language. That to me would be awesome if we could actually get to that stage, because I worry that it sometimes starts to lack a bit of heart, and that I find that a bit wrong, and I presume as well that others do too. So everyone has the best intentions, but I think we need to sort of find new and creative ways of expressing that. So that's sort of really important to me, because I'd love to see this done through really cool ways of language and art. You know, naming, I can't believe it's taken so long for us to get Jillijaroo off the ground as well. And you know, as in the new play space and park out at Ballymanus, it's a really cool name. And once you know how to pronounce it properly, it rolls off the tongue, and you learn that it means place of play, and it just makes so much sense. And to me, it should be the sort of thing that, you know, we just do so much more often. I'm part of a rowing club, and we've named a couple of our boats in local Wadawurrung language. And again, that's awesome, because you then have a whole new generation of young people. To them, it's nothing unusual. They learn a few new words, and that's just, to me, so important. It's something that I've also tried to, incorporate a little bit through a couple of my council-based roles. So I've been the chair of Her Majesty's Theatre for a couple of years now, and we try to, you know, through functions like that, get a range of, you know, culturally diverse shows, because to me, it's just a case of a lot of lack of understanding, really. And look, I've got to confess, I'm still learning as well. I'm on a journey. You know, I've got still so much to learn. And one of the most incredible things for me as a brand new councillor 4 years ago was having the opportunity to go through some cultural awareness training, where you could ask all those silly questions that you're too afraid to normally ask, and to make sure that I, as a councillor, get the chance to correct anything that's wrong with my language, or do everything I possibly can to recognise an awesome people. So that for me...
It's a really great segue into a number of the questions that are piling in now with, and I did want to actually just acknowledge that you were one of 2 councillors that completed the cultural competency training to any extent. So, you know, not a tokenistic gesture at all. And important, I think, given the history of this town, which is a neat way to say, the name of Dana Street is actually named after a man who was in charge of Aboriginal massacres as part of running the Aboriginal police here. And what we understand from Henry Dana is that he actually abducted Gunai Kurnai mob and brought them to police the Wadawurrung tribe, and there were confrontations and lots of people actually died. So, you know, we interested in hearing about what work might be done to start making those other name changes and to actually think about, you know, removing those types of signs and monuments from the city.
It's useful for us to, I guess, as a city, become aware of a lot of that, Ange. And for me, when I was at the Survival Dawn service on the 26th of January earlier on this year, it was as the speakers were reading through the list of massacres across our state that you're standing there just getting emotional about it. It's just, you just sort of think, you know, how did we allow that to happen in the first place? How did we, and how is it that we aren't taught that stuff as kids in our schools? You know, so for me, I think learning and understanding is a huge part of it. So once we get to a point where enough people actually understand what you've just outlined then, Ange, it becomes a no-brainer. But at the moment, I don't think there's that understanding. So that's, I think not enough of us are on this journey right now of understanding. And Jay was even right before when he mentioned that it's not just cultural awareness in regard to this brilliant, rich, centuries old Indigenous traditions, but even in terms of cultural awareness about our other groups and other minorities in the city. And that for me, it should be just something that every councillor does. And it's fun. To me, it's the most rewarding thing that I've actually had experience as a candidate. So if I don't get up and elected again, then to the 3 people that do in North Ward, just enjoy the experience of meeting so many wonderful people, because we are such a cool, progressive city. And there's so many diverse, wonderful people. It's the coolest part of the job.
Just a final question from me, because I know you've been really committed to the arts, especially with Her Madges. What do you see in terms of the role of the arts in COVID recovery?
Well, as someone who has a total of 0 creative talent, I can say that I have, that means I actually bow before the greatness of those who do. When I was filling out the really long Arts Alive survey, I was reflecting more on that and thinking, there's so much that you can actually we can actually do to activate spaces and get people moving in terms of physical art installations. And I'd love to see a lot more Indigenous sculpture and paintings and even sound as well too throughout our city. They do something really cool outside the Opera House. If you ever do that, there's a button you can push on a nice big totem that in local language does explain some of the history there too. And so there's ways of doing these things in a really cool and creative way. And equally, the performing arts that you mentioned, Her Madge, and it would scare the hell out of me to get up on stage and do the type of things that these wonderful people do, which is why I am just in awe of them. And we also have such an incredible youth population here as well too. And I try when I can to get along to some of our youth council sessions, and they are constantly talking about this sort of stuff, and they're not represented. So it's our job to be doing more of that. Sorry, I'm rambling, Ange.
No, that's great. No, thank you. That was really great. I'm going to kick off on David Harris now. David, welcome to the forum. Great to meet you.
Good to meet you too, Ange. Thanks for having me on.
So, do you want a refresher, or are you happy just to kick in?
No, I can jump straight into it. So,
beautiful. Thank you.
I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country we meet today, the Wadawurrung and Dja Dja Wurrung people, and also pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Independent candidate, I live in Miners Rest with my family. I've grown up in Ballarat and travelled around the state, came back to Ballarat in 2011. And just a little bit more about my background. So I work for CFA as an Assistant Chief Fire Officer. I've been involved with the organisation for 20 years. And I started originally volunteering in the Ballarat area when I was growing up here. A big driver for me is being part of a community, being involved and volunteering. It was something that was passed on to me by my parents, and I'm passing on to our kids as well, Catherine and myself. The things I value: integrity, fairness and community. And if you've seen any of my campaign stuff, it speaks a lot to that. And part of that's being part of a progressive council. That's what I'd hope to be a part of. So the questions that were posed to candidates in terms of this first 3 minutes of describing ourselves was really good. First one was, how do you plan to use your experience? So clearly my experience is in public service and serving the community. In many cases in an operational sense, during times of crisis. That would be with CFA, but certainly in my community advocacy and volunteering, it's about serving the community, listening to its needs and being a part of it. And I'll bring that experience with me to council. In terms of what other experiences have I had growing up, and it's interesting sometimes in terms of how do you judge a person's character? It's by what you see. So my lived experience is reasonably privileged, and I've had a good, successful life. The truth is, though, I've got insulin-dependent diabetes. It's a condition I've had since I was 6, and so I've almost lived 2 lives in that sense, because there's always that element that people see. And I do know that whenever anyone considers that you have a disability, all of a sudden you're treated very, very differently. So I've hidden that that disease for most of my life and through most of my working career. It's only really been the last couple of years I've been willing to disclose it to people outside of where I was obliged to. So with that and with my being brought up, I have a lot of empathy for people. I do care genuinely about community. I don't like bigotry, and I certainly don't like bullies. So it's through those beliefs and values that I would also complement my role as a councillor if I was elected. In terms of what have I actively done in the past to help people, in my workplace, I've always advocated for fairness, diversity and inclusion. It's an interesting thing, and I probably can't speak too candidly because I'm still employed by the organisation. It might be detrimental to me, but one thing I can say is that I've certainly represented, assisted and supported people in the Victorian Equal Opportunity Human Rights Commission and at the Fair Work Commission on a number of occasions where they've been discriminated against because of protected attributes. Sometimes that can be at odds with the role that I'm actually employed to do by the organisation, but I do it because it's the right thing and I don't like seeing people unfairly treated. So again, it's with that passion that I'd bring my skill set to council.
Perfect. Just a quick, sorry, that's your three on the upfront bit, but it's a nice segue because one of the things I'm interested in about you is that you are a graduate of our local leadership community, and I think that's actually a really exciting opportunity because I think alumni from that group is still well connected. What do you see your role, given that you're such an empathic and caring grassroots kind of community driven kind of guy, what do you see your role in terms of influencing all of those, you know, heads of industry and so forth in terms of, you know, making Ballarat a better place?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's sometimes I'm a bit of an idealist, and I reckon it's about achieving compromise. And compromise doesn't necessarily mean that everyone loses their main purpose or what they're trying to achieve, but it's about finding where we can recognise that we can actually mutually benefit one another. And so linking in with industry, well, industries obviously require a workforce. How do you maintain a workforce? It's about having a happy and sustainable community. It's about having communities that work together and actually love this place where we live. So I don't know that there's sort of divergent ends. I think the means that I would bring to it would be someone that can sit down, talk to people and help them see where they have mutual and beneficial interest. Excellent. And one final question from me is, a lot of the forums that I've heard is people talking about a lack of ability to move without the help of state government. Now, I understand you've had lots of experience in terms of negotiating that, but I'd be really keen to hear, you know, are there other ways? Are there other ways to win the hearts and minds and get things off the ground? Well, I reckon I can see there's a strong role for councillors to have that degree of advocacy in their heart. And the ability to influence. So one of the things, and I often harp on about it, and I do occasionally see people's eyes roll when I talk about it, but you know, a genuine independent, someone that is apolitical, and through my life as a public servant employed by an organisation, like I have to be apolitical, so it's not new to me. But the benefit is that when we go with evidence to the people that are making the decisions, that hold the budgets and the resources, you can present them with the information that they need, and particularly through, say, like election periods. When you go to the candidates from the opposite side, you're amazed at the amount of power and influence the community can have when they play on a fair playing field and give the same information to everyone. So that's probably what I've learnt in my community advocacy, and that's what I bring to council. I really like that. That's fantastic. Peter, Eddie, have we unmuted you yet?
Yes, thanks, Ange. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and recognise their elders, past, present and emerging leaders for the future. It's been really great listening today, and the diversity of people putting forward. I think I'd probably like to say that I think we are lucky that there is going to be a strong opportunity for so many people this year to select from a really good bunch of candidates, and it's certainly been very informative today. Just a little about myself. I'm a long-term resident of Ballarat North. I was born in the North. I'm one of 6 kids from probably a struggling family. So I have learnt in growing up you know, what it takes to make the effort to get somewhere in life. But at the same time, it makes me very respectful and appreciative of what's happened in people's lives as time has gone on. I think that in making a decision 2 years ago, knowing I was about to finish in my current role and step away, I think what was important to me was to make sure that I look for a community engagement going forward that was actually going to provide an opportunity for me to have some continuing input into the community and try, if I was fortunate to be elected, to make sure that I could actually represent fairly and solidly people's views, and hence the reason I decided to stand as an independent. The organisation I come from in Ballarat Basketball, obviously we represented not only our members, but in total some 8,500 members when you brought in the other sports we're involved in, the other community groups, and a number of different activities and I suppose not only sport but social engagements that we felt were really important for the future. And I think doing that, it actually, when I was looking at the things you wanted me to touch on today, I think it was probably important that for me, and it is mainly a sporting perspective, but I find it rather ironic that we're talking about female-friendly facilities anywhere. In 1997, when we rebuilt the basketball stadium, you know, a not-for-profit community centre owned by its own members, we actually put in the same elite and local change rooms for men and women. And that's 1997, and we're still talking about it today. When the Sports and Events Centre was recently developed, last year that won an Inclusiveness Award from Basketball Victoria, and it has been recognised locally as well for the universal design principles that have been put into that centre from the start, not having to be retrofitted as we're talking about with Mars Stadium, and the work that's been done to make sure that the facility there will cater for our future. In looking at that lesson, it actually took us back to the basketball stadium to say, what could we do better? And we committed there, in my time before I finished there a couple of weeks ago, we committed to a $700,000 adaptive sports centre upgrade to actually make that centre a home for regional Victoria for adaptive sports, be it wheelchair sport, deaf sports, and a whole variety of things.
It's amazing.
About the ageing community a while ago, and one of the things with our programs and developing for Ballarat Sports and Events was to make sure that we actually put aside time to look at the whole day. And that day now, when we don't use it for sport and basketball from 4 o'clock onwards, up till then every day, we've got the likes of Fed Uni, University of the Third Age for older adults, those sort of community groups using that as a social hub. They can have a coffee there, they can use the courts, they can use the foyer area that's got a nice lounge area where the coffee shop is, and they can just enjoy the social interactions that come with that. So I think that in that sense, that's been a lot of my commitment in that space. We also run programs for the refugee community. We've got a Sudanese boys program at Mount Clear Secondary College, and we have worked hard in that space to make sure that we're working with schools to engage people in community sport.
Beautiful. It sounds like you've got a lot of existing relationships that you'll be bringing into council. Just want to throw to the questions so that you don't lose time there. Yep. We're throwing across to Sally Missing, who has a question.
Oh, hi, Peter. I can see from your campaigning information that you're very committed to improving the governance of Ballarat City Council, which I think is very much needed. But what I'm really interested to know is how high on your priority list is climate change, and what are the sorts of things that you think council should be doing in terms of climate change?
Thanks, Sally, for that question. And look, I think well, governance is a priority, obviously, for me, because having worked with council and governments for probably 10 years, I've learned that if it doesn't start with a fundamental decency about how we've structured and I suppose the right way to go about things, we're really not going to progress our organisation, or the city in this case. In terms of climate change, certainly I fully understand the need. You know, at the Minor Dome, again, just to bring back to my own life experiences, we put 360 solar panels on the roof there. We converted from an environment of dependence on, you know, doing other things to contributing. We did the same with saving water to use in different areas. I think we need to go beyond that. We've got a lot of work to do in BWES, which I'm very popular, very keen to see develop well. I'd like to see, you know, the all waste interchange developed in that space. One of the big things, and I talked on this in a forum, so I may be repeating myself to some, but one of the things I think we still need to do is educate people. It's not a matter of whether you believe or don't believe in climate change. Clearly, we have a critical problem. One of the things we need to do is to educate and to use practical, informative people to carry that message. And that's quite often members of the community who are hands-on. And I relayed the story of Charles Massey on Australian Story last week talking about regenerative farming. He was very much in the space many years ago of talking to a handful of people, and now he's talking to 250, 350 hardcore farmers who are now seeing it's not only good for the environment, it's good for our community, and it's good commercial sense. I hope, Sally, that somewhat answers that question.
I have another question from the chat group here, talking about gambling revenue and your commitment to reducing problem gambling in Ballarat.
Yeah, look, I think that is another good question, and certainly I've had experience more recently in a decision around reducing number of hours within a particular sports venue in Ballarat that actually has made a commitment to reducing hours by 13 hours a week for the very reason, and to look at both the policy on that and also on sports gambling. I think both those issues go together. I think a serious concern for me around sports gambling is the fact that every time you put on a footy game or whatever it is, that becomes the flavour of the event you're watching. And I think it's just becoming indoctrinated into our community from a young age upwards. And then certainly in terms of gambling and poker machines particularly, there is a concern there that certainly needs to be regulated and controlled in that space.
Awesome. You mentioned about the disability action planning that you've been doing there. Are you happy to commit to pursuing the universal accessibility in all of the new governments, all of the new council's developments?
Oh, look, definitely. It really would surprise me that it's not front of mind now for everyone in terms of where we need to be going forward, particularly with new facilities that are being planned. I just couldn't comprehend why we wouldn't be doing that. You know, I understand there's a cost and there's sometimes just logistical issues with being able to put in the accessibility we now require into old buildings or old homes around Ballarat, but it is something that we should commit to as a council to make sure that everything we can possibly do in that space is put together to actually achieve that.
Excellent, thank you. Grant Tillett, do you need a refresh on the upfront question, or are you happy just to speak?
I'm happy to speak.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so my name is Grant Tillett and I live at Mount Rowan, and I've lived at Mount Rowan for 60-something years. And I'm an older person, no argument about that. I left school at age 17 and 3 days later I started work. I finished work more or less about 10 years ago as a self-made person, as a self-funded retiree. As I said, I'm old and I do have a disability. Of sorts, I've got a bad leg. I'm entitled to use a disabled car park. And I have to say that as an old person, I felt discriminated against today during this course of this event because the younger ones were derogatory, in my view, to the older ones. And it is so easy for that to happen. My right as a resident is to nominate for council and to be taken as an equal, irrespective of my age, the same as the young ones expect them to be taken as an equal, notwithstanding their youth. So it's very easy for mistakes to be made. I have heard people talking today and over the course of this event about the inability of the council to act cohesively. I would suggest that anybody seriously thinks that that was the case during this current council now should do a count up of the number of motions that were passed in the chamber, and it worked out exactly how many of them were unanimous and how many of them were a split vote. It is important that there be a diverse series of opinions in the chamber, because if not, you run the risk of becoming a rubber stamp. And the last thing that a council needs to be is tarred with the brush of just being a rubber stamp for what is presented by the officers. Now, I noticed that we're supposed to be talking about interested communities who actually don't have access to platforms on issues such as Aboriginal reconciliation, LGBTIQ inclusion, gender equality, housing affordability, disability rights, ageing and young communities, gambling harm reduction, and I'll leave the union one out and talk about that in a minute. Every single one of those organisations has every right to be available, to have available to them the opportunity to be considered and supported by council.
Well, I think the thing that we've been talking about there, though, is if you look around, there's one LGBTQIA+ person on council currently. There's not a 50-50 split of women. The council dynamic is not necessarily representative of intercultural community. So that's why we're interested in how you would represent those views. So I've attended council meetings a number of times, and I've also watched it. So that's what we're actually asking is how would you support Aboriginal community? How is your relationship with the LGBTQIA+ community?
As far as I'm aware, I don't have a problem with either of those. And you asked me a question, I'll answer the question.
But I just asked you.
How will I deal with them?
No, I'm not asking how you're going to deal with them. I'm going to ask you how you will represent and engage with them.
I will represent and engage them fairly based on the evidence in front of me. It's as simple as that. And that is the responsibility of the councillor. You don't have to be a member of the community or speak openly about it to understand it and to be able to support it. Councillors have an obligation by their pledge that they take, as a matter of fact, when they're first elected, never to make a decision before they have heard the presentations on the night and adjudged where the strength or the weighting should go in relation to positive or negative. A councillor cannot come into a chamber, legally can't come into a chamber with a fixed opinion that he's going to vote yes or no because he or she hasn't heard the evidence at that time. So anybody who believes that they can become a councillor and carry the flag, immovable flag, in relation to one or more of those elements is in direct conflict with the requirements of the Local Government Act and subject potentially to a jail sentence if they're caught at it. So we have to be completely malleable and open-minded about what we deal with based on the evidence as presented at the time.
So how would you describe the quality of your relationship with the Aboriginal community here?
I don't have a problem with them that I know of.
No, I'm asking about your relationship with them. So who would you go to speak to about what's happening for Koori community, for example, through COVID?
I had a very affable meeting in a very recent time with Deanne Gilson, and as far as I'm concerned, she's the representative of her mother, who is the senior traditional owner.
But you are aware that there's a broader Aboriginal community here in Ballarat?
Oh, absolutely. And they've also got an organisation which looks after them too. The Aboriginal Co-op is specifically there for that purpose, is it not?
No, that's actually not what a co-op does. A co-op provides services to all sorts of people. For example, I get my doctor's service from there. I go to the GP at Ballarat Community Health. But what I'm asking though is more around the governance. Like how will you seek the views of Aboriginal people to inform your decisions? What does that consultation look like for you?
Okay, so if there is a group, and if you want to use the Aboriginal one as an example, but I mentioned the others that were on your list.
Or the young people or my community, my rainbow community.
If those people have a problem with council, they are free to come to council and make the presentation, and if they do it correctly, as do many, I might add, then they will get their way in through the system. They won't do it overnight, but they will get their way through into the system and will find themselves being sought more and more for their opinions and their advice. If there are groups in the community who are sitting back quietly, waiting for inspiration to strike, it'll never strike. You've got to be proactive, and you've got to bring your issues to the councillors, not the officers necessarily, and there's a big difference between the two. I've heard some discussion this afternoon about people not being respected, their opinions not being respected. And in fact, candidate Aitchison mentioned it at one stage, and I tried to get a message through. The issue is, who was she talking to?
So there are conversations that people have directly with council, and that there are mechanisms, and I think, you know, everything does not need to be mediated through councillors. I think you're misrepresenting what how council works, and how people are able to engage and to influence things. For example, I could talk to maternal child health for information about kids and speak to managers there. I don't necessarily believe that that's something that you would be able to pursue or progress. And there's a range of ways that people engage with their local council, including via councillors. I think that's your time up there, Grant. Thank you very much for the feedback and for answering those questions. We could take unmute, please, Bryn HILLS. Welcome, Bryn.
Thanks very much, Ange. Yes, I'm Bryn HILLS, and I'm standing as the Animal Justice Party candidate in North Ward. And I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians, pay my respects to all elders past and present. I'm standing as an Animal Justice Party candidate because I share the values of the party. It's a values-based party, and its core values are kindness, equality, rationality, and non-violence. I've been a musician for 40 years, and the musician fraternity is you know, pretty well known for its you know, rallying to the cause, often to support people in times of hardship, often in support of supporting ending discrimination, often in support of helping out disadvantaged communities, and certainly all of the musicians that I've had the privilege of working with have been of that ilk. So I've learned a little bit about diversity there. And the importance of celebrating diversity, and the importance of inclusivity. I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher in the state education system. I've been a teacher for 26 years. And my job means that I have to run an inclusive classroom. So everyone that comes into every student that comes into my classroom has to be made feel welcome, regardless of gender identity or race or religion or whatever. So I really try hard, and teachers try really hard to make all kids feel welcome and to engage them as much as we possibly can, and to have really a welcoming and a positive relationship, which we can, you know, help really kids become good citizens and a valuable part of society.
I really like what you just said then, Bryn, about young people and being part of it. Any insight into how you know, grow that civil activism from young people in the town? Sorry for cutting you off if you need to keep speaking.
That's okay. No, I can go there. Yeah, I think it's about engagement, if I could speak to it in terms of that. So I'm a music teacher, and I know that kids need something to be engaged with. Now, it could be sport, it could be music, it could be art, it could be maths, it could be science, it could be absolutely anything. But I know from experience that if kids have something that they feel connected to, or a person, more and importantly, an adult that they feel connected to, then that can really help them flourish, and that can really help them develop their ideas and really develop their identity too, I guess. And so, you know, as a teacher, it's about providing opportunities. It's about providing opportunities for engagement. And where you can do that, and where you can light that spark, you can have incredible success. And, you know, my area is music. So I know that not every student is going to play for the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, but, you know, music can do so much in terms of mental health, in terms of connectivity with school, in terms of social development, in terms of cognitive development. So there's all these other sorts of things going on. And I think, you know, if council, well, society really, this is a societal kind of attitude. It takes a village to raise a child. And, you know, the department that I work with and very much works along those lines.
Amazing. Just quickly on council developments and social housing, anything you'd like to add to that part of the conversation? It's been one of the major themes through this conversation with the Alliance.
Yes, well, I know that I was reading the Planning and Environment Act was changed this year by the state government so that an affordable housing contribution could be allocated in new developments, and certainly that is a good idea. And I think that, you know, council should be leveraging all new developments to be contributing to that. I mean, you know, obviously there's a problem with not enough social housing and community housing. So, you know, stuff that council can do in this space in terms of leadership and in terms of community attitudes. I know other candidates have spoken about that as well. But there are other avenues where this issue can be addressed.
And finally, just a quick one on COVID recovery and Ballarat's live music scene and engagement and entertainment and community coming back together. What are your insights there?
Yeah, wow. That's because I have so many friends that are, you know, it's the society has been hit hard by this, but the music industry has been hit incredibly hard by this because no one can do any gigs. So, you know, we've got to be guided by the health guidelines, but, you know, certainly if we can offer, from a council point of view, you know, I worked on the live music strategy subcommittee with for council, and I know that there are things that council can do to help live performance, to assist venues, to assist musicians. One of the things I'd like to see is council offering grants to artists, performing artists, visual artists, so to encourage them and also to stimulate the local economy. So, you know, there's those types of things that I think council can be, you know, really quite active in that space. And, you know, advertising, showing leadership, going to all these events and you know, being part of that. You know, I've been to quite a few freezer events, and I know that they're fantastic events, and they're just great to see how all the, you know, the kids get together, and they are just some of the greatest gigs that I've been to. They're fantastic. And I just think they deserve I know that council is encouraging of events like that, but they just so deserve every encouragement.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We're just going to cross back across to Bridget AITCHISON really, really quickly. Just to clarify, because we didn't want the record to show that people couldn't directly engage with council as a matter of course.
Hi. I'm glad I hung around to listen to everyone. That was a bit of a surprise to hear what I said get misconstrued quite so badly. Look, it's an election period, and for goodness sakes, this is City Council, not, you know, ruler of the free world, and we're all going to have to work together. We're going to have to, you know, put personal differences and party aside and work together for the best of Ballarat. So let me clarify what I meant. In my role as Campus Dean of ACU, I've had a lot of consultations with the City of Ballarat. In some cases, that was with councillors, usually not all of them, usually a few at a time, or it was with officers or staff or directors. And there are two separate sides to the council. There is the 9 councillors, and then there is the staff. And they have different responsibilities in different areas of authority. Now, I've interacted with both. I've interacted quite a bit with the council. I know all 9 of them by name and by sight, and they know who I am. We've had social interactions as well as business interactions. What I said was that there were a number of times over this last term of council, more than a few, when I have been asked to attend a consultation to get the view of the city's business leaders, and whether that's health and knowledge, business, whatever, where we have been presented with an idea or a list of ideas and then asked for our input and our thoughts. And then what has gone out to the public is exactly what they started with no modification to it based on anything we've said. And this happened repeatedly. Now, it is not all councillors, and it is not always the councillors. It is sometimes the staff and officers. But it does say to me that there is an entrenched mentality that consultation is a box you tick off rather than something where you genuinely listen to people and care about what they say. And that's why I'm running. I want to change that entrenched mentality. And I think
Perfect.
a number of the other candidates want to too. But I will not name names because that's not fair to those who are running again.
Thank you so much for the clarification. I think it was a really important thing to clarify. And that actually reflects my experience as somebody who has been employed to do consultations for council, who's contributed to a number of plans, including, say, facilitating the Eureka conversation with the Eureka subcommittee, because there are a wide number of voices and councillors were just one of those voices around those committee tables. So thank you. And last but not least, can we please unmute Ellen Burns?
Thanks, Ange.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting. And thanks for all the other candidates for coming and for sticking around. 2.5 hours is a really big commitment. And to be honest, I'm pretty disappointed by the amount of councillors that haven't attended today. It's really great to have 7 out of the 8 North Ward councillors here. So good job, guys. I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land that I'm on, the Wadawurrung people, and also the Dja Dja Wurrung people that are the traditional owners of the northern part of North Ward. Pretty much everything I do in my life is about inclusion. So my small business that I run, the name of my small business is We Bar None, which some people get straight away. Some people have to explain it to them. Basically, it's a play on the phrase bar none, which means to exclude nobody. And my range of products tailors to a wide range of dietary requirements and choices. And I really enjoy creating a range that a lot of people can have that usually aren't catered for. All of my stuff is also plastic free. My business is zero waste and carbon neutral. So I bring those sustainability principles into my business as well. The other thing I spend most of my time doing is running my volunteer group, the Hidden Orchard. And that is a group that harvests unwanted fruit from people's backyards and also public land and redistribute it to the community. And through that, we are addressing the food waste issue, but we're also addressing food security, which a lot of people aren't aware of what a huge problem that is in Ballarat. In 2015, a Monash study found that 12% of Ballarat residents had access food relief in that year. And that figure's expected to have doubled thanks to COVID-19. So when we talk about social housing and that kind of thing, I have a really big experience with that community in Ballarat from a food perspective. We supply food to over 30 food relief charities in Ballarat, and that ranges from charities catering to school breakfast programs for kids, families, homeless people, you know, breezeway meals and soup bus, and also the elderly as well. And a lot of the houses that we harvest from, a lot of them are elderly people that are too old to harvest their own fruit. Usually they have had a great life of making jam out of all of their apples and stone fruit, but they are not able to harvest it themselves, or also people with disabilities. So we help them to harvest the fruit, give it, some of it to them, some of it to the volunteers, and a lot of it to the community. So that's a couple of, those are the big things that I do in my life, and it's all around inclusion. So yeah, I want to bring those values into council. You know, it's very, very obvious that Belinda has been a huge champion for most of these causes on council, and she's the reason why I'm running for council. Basically, I've known Belinda for 15 years, and she is what inspired me to run for council, because I saw that you could be a councillor and have those really strong values, and that hard work and dedication pays off, and it's possible to address these issues. So that's what I'm hoping to get in to achieve.
So you're one of the young up-and-comers. I've seen a lot of the commentary in the Courier again, and this is not to be offensive Grant TILLETT in terms of the Alliance and the questions we're posing. Rather, it reflects the comments from the broader community about a lack of age and what that means. We certainly do value the experience of people that have knowledge in different sectors, etc. I think it's really important, but I'd be interested in your reflections around business startup as part of COVID. I saw in the paper this week that you were, or maybe on your page, you're promoting other people. So you're obviously very good at sending the elevator back down, which I think is incredibly important. Do you see a role in new business startup and council getting and accelerating that space for the Ballarat community?
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the other things that I have gotten into with my business that I didn't mention is actually mentoring and workshops. So over the last couple of years, I've done a lot of workshops with a lot of school-aged kids, high school-aged kids, and also people in uni that are looking to start their own business and become an entrepreneur. So I've already been doing a lot of work in that space, and running your own business is it's a great equalizer. And people talk about merit-based things, and running your own business is totally 100% merit-based. Nobody is hiring you, you're hiring yourself. So what we see often is really great equality in terms of female-male representation, age representation, all types of backgrounds running their own business. And something that I've found, because I am a product business, I have a lot of stockists, and most of the stockists that I have in Ballarat are actually female-run businesses. There's a couple of couples that run businesses, but overwhelmingly, there's this really strong female representation in small business in Ballarat, and that's not often talked about. And I actually didn't necessarily see that representation until I became a business owner myself. Because I think a lot of people have this concept of a business owner as being, you know, a middle-aged male sitting at a boardroom, looking at some charts, you know, yeah. which is kind of a common thing that I get a lot. But in reality, a lot of the businesses in Ballarat are mums running businesses from out of their houses, looking after kids at the same time, couples, young people, you know, it's the whole range of the Ballarat community that are running their own small businesses, and micro businesses as well. That's an important distinction to make. So empowering people to run their own business is something that I'm really passionate about, because that is empowering people to create their own career. You know, I've created my own career in 5 years just out of something that I've been passionate about. I'm an innovator in my industry. I was the first business in Victoria to have home compostable packaging. So I've been used as a case study now literally around the world by very, very large businesses who I won't name out of respect. But you know, that's the kind of innovation that we're able to have in Ballarat, and we're seeing that so much in Ballarat. Yeah,
that's awesome. And I think innovation, as an innovation consultant myself, I think people actually don't understand what that looks like, and I think that's a unique skill set that would benefit council in terms of the quick pivot and the minimum viable products and testing and running with things. The other part that I'm really keen to hear from you, and I think is kind of part of where the Alliance is kind of our hearts lie, is volunteerism and the opportunity to engage people from across all age groups into helping council deliver its strategic goals and connecting back in. I mean, Peter talked about sports, and obviously there's a lot of volunteerism there, but yours is a really unique food-based one. Are there any other opportunities you can see for building out council's role in growing the volunteering sector?
Yeah, absolutely. That's another one of my big passions is volunteer groups and community groups. So 22% of Ballarat residents volunteer, and that's above the state average. So we are a community that is full of people working for nothing for the good of the community. And I see the same issues time and time again with community groups. I'm part of quite a few community groups, and it's often the case that what they need is often not financial support. It's things like meeting spaces, storage spaces, training, and social media, networks, just simple things like bringing groups together like this community alliance, which is amazing, that's brought these different groups together that kind of have a shared vision of what Ballarat could look like. And in the past, we've seen these groups working in silos where they're really, you know, they're focused on their one little bit, but other groups, you know, kind of cross over, but there's no kind of communication or working together. So I think there's a lot that can be done in that area.
Perfect. Now, if you all wouldn't mind hanging around North Wardies, we've run you a bit late, but we would like to give you a free fall question and work our way back through the group as a final question. Is that okay? Everybody twiddle your fingers if that's okay. Yep, perfect. Thank you. Taken as an okay thing to do. So essentially, we'd just like you to reflect on the social housing issue around Ballarat and making sure that developments are sustainable as we go. We'll work back from Ellen and work our way back through the list. So back to you, Ellen.
Great, thanks, Ange. Sustainable development is one of my really big passions, especially running for North Ward. And when I say sustainable, I should be clear because Kumuda brought up a great point before. I don't just mean manageable, I mean the whole encompassing of sustainable. So bringing in climate action and things like lowering emissions, renewable energies. At the moment, the developments in Ballarat are built to the very lowest acceptable standard, and that's not really good enough. I think we need to really raise the standards there and make sure that they're being built with the future and with the community in mind. So we need insulated houses that windows face north. You know, there's so many things that we can do just in very simple design elements that make comfortable houses, lower emissions, lower power bills for people. And in planning these new developments that have been earmarked for 2 areas of North Ward, Mount Rowan towards Miners Rest and towards Lucas and Alfreton, building onto Lucas and Alfreton, we need to really make sure that we're planning for the future and encompass a lot of these things that we've mentioned today, like social housing. We spoke in a previous forum about making sure that there's space made out the west for a new high school. You know, high school is not a council issue, but making sure that the land is available is a council issue. So we need to be having those conversations with developers, and that's going to happen over the next council term because building's due to begin in 2025. So that's going to happen as soon as we get in, basically.
Good to be proactive and actually looking forward. Bryn, any insights there you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, just in terms of sustainability, I guess, you know, a thing that I've been talking about in this campaign is the biodiversity crisis. And so this is really, you know, before the state government, there's an inquiry about this at the moment, but, you know, we have to be looking at this at the local level, and really it's critical that developers have this as really the highest priority. Along there, it's one of the principal climate damage is one of the drivers of biodiversity loss. But, you know, the Ballarat Strategy 2040 admitted that there was really little data on the biodiversity in Ballarat. And there hasn't been a lot of work done since. But we really need to, but it also admitted that it needs to be part of everyday decision making. So, you know, we're at a critical juncture in terms of climate damage, but we're also at a really critical juncture in terms of biodiversity protection. So this needs to happen in terms of development, and also council can play a role in, I've spoken about this, in helping residents in terms of how they can protect their own habitat, what types of trees they can plant, whether they be food trees or habitat trees. If there's council areas in their local area, how is that best looked after? Not using poisons, a whole raft of things where council can really take a leadership role across a whole heap of different areas in terms of protecting biodiversity, which I think will become increasingly spoken about and important for whoever is the next lot of councillors.
Excellent, very good. Mr. TILLETT.
Grant, you just need to unmute yourself.
There we go, you're all good. Some reflections on sustainable development.
Yeah, okay. The issue is there that the state planning provisions are there to guide developments. The City of Ballarat does not have the authority to modify in any way the requirements of those statutes. If there are people in the community, and there are, who want to see those things changed, then there is a process to do it. It'll take probably 3 years, but it is there, and it can be and should be, and I would encourage anybody who thinks that way to do it. The planning for the city is not necessarily the purview of the City of Ballarat. The state planning provisions supersede override the local planning provisions, and a developer only has to be able to prove that he complies with the state planning provisions and the local planning provisions, and the council can't stop him. So there are lots of things in the planning and operations of council that, until you've been there for a long time, sort of knocking on the door for 20 years in my case, that it takes a fair bit to understand. And I support 90% of what I've heard here today, but you'll never achieve it if you don't take it down the correct pathway.
Okay, thank you. Peter, Eddie, back to you.
Thanks, Ange. And look, I think a lot of that's pretty much as has been said, but I do think that I like the idea of actually trying to integrate not only sustainable development, but also what we talked about earlier, and particularly Mark Harris's point around social housing and making sure that we get a balance of what we do with our growth planning that picks up on both those key points to make sure that we actually address the issues of an evenly balanced integrated community where it's not rich and poor, it is just a community of people who can actually live together and enjoy, you know, the social amenity and space they have. I think in terms of, as Bryn said, in terms of our biodiversity, making sure that we actually plan our future and we actually look at trying to not only plan but educate the members of the community on what they can do when they're planning houses. It shouldn't be just a legislative requirement. It should be an education requirement that we actually make people aware and we influence developers to think about this same strategy of encouraging people to think about what is the best footprint on your block of land to actually make that a sustainable project. So I think there's a lot of work in that space, but I think it's an exciting time as well because more and more of our community have a sense of social responsibility that will engage in these things. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. David Harris.
Yeah, thanks, Ange. I reckon I'm going to have to be fully frank here that my knowledge will not match Alan or Jay's, I don't suspect, on this one. I've seen them speak a lot about this at forums and I really am taken by their enthusiasm for it. The only thing I would say is that, yeah, look, if I got into council, with respect to the social housing and sustainability, that's stuff that we need to fix. I reckon that there is an avenue for us to fix it through the planning scheme and working with state government. And if it does take time, it takes time. But I mean, that's what governance is about. So yeah, I'm completely for using some initiatives, but you're going to have smarter people than me to come up with them.
I think the point that everybody's made is that it's about consulting and checking in with experts and, you know, taking the best possible advice. So that I don't think that means that you're not going to be capable on council. Daniel Moloney.
I'm going to get myself in a little trouble by talking about another candidate, but too bad. I'm just going to quickly acknowledge Grant because, how do I sort of say this? There was a time earlier on this year when I came out as bi, and Grant was one of the most supportive people around me, and I am grateful for that. And I don't think that credit where due, you know, because that meant a lot. So
that's great.
You know, I don't think people see that, and I think they should. Now on social housing, and back to topic.
I just want to say thanks for nailing your colours on the vote, mate. It's always really good, and for the Rainbow crew that is here today, the comments that I see in and across the rainbow community is that your representation and being out is incredibly important to everybody for many, many reasons that you might never ever hear about. But yeah, thank you. Just as a neat segue. Sustainable development.
It's been a big year. It's been a big year in many ways. Lucky. So sustainable development. Well, look, it's partly look. There's a lot of technical reasons that make things a bit challenging, but I also think that as we sort of grow, especially a bit more out to the north, that there's some opportunity to encourage developers to adopt those best principle practices we've talked about, because it's a selling point. You know, I think anyone who wants to come to our town to live and to buy, you know, a property in a brand new suburb, wouldn't it be awesome if that brand new suburb was almost off-grid, fully sustainable, and able to you know, operate in a you know, almost off-grid sustainable way. And I think that's a marketable element for both you know, a potential home buyer, for a developer. It's a win-win situation, and it's great for the environment, of course, too. But we also are not really kicking enough goals on infill development. We need more people living in central Ballarat.
Yeah.
That to me is the answer to all of businesses' problems, because we cannot depend upon tourism to solve all of our problems in central Ballarat. We need more locals living, you know, in the heart of Ballarat and, you know, walking and cycling to their, you know, their shops and their workplaces and all those sort of things. That's sort of the answer, I think.
Awesome. I feel like I've, as part of this alliance, just to let everybody know, I sit in a big block in Ballarat East, and I've always sworn I would never subdivide, but maybe I should.
Well, you might make a bit of money out of it.
Infill, no, but for infill purposes only. And finally, Jay Morrison.
Yeah, thank you, Ange, for this question. I'm really passionate about social housing. As a young person, I had to rely on social housing in different parts of my life, growing up as a kid. And then when I left home at 16 as well, when I moved into a house, a kids undercover house. Social housing for me is a class issue. It has a lot of stigma around it, and I think the council has a key role to play in advocating for social housing and working towards removing that stigma. I'd like to see some sort of policy development around social housing, because council doesn't really have one at the moment. They say go to the providers. If you head to their website, these are the providers, and that's it. I'd like to see some affordable rental homes in all major development. Inclusionary zoning is very important to make sure that it doesn't continue to be a class issue going forward. I'd like to see more short-term crisis accommodation provided. We know the recommendations of the Family Violence Royal Commission goes to this, to say that there is not enough short-term crisis accommodation for people. If you read the Courier last week, you would have seen an article that says that there are people living in motels. There are kids who are living in motels and caravans because they don't have housing available to them. And that's something the council can absolutely play a role in addressing. When it comes to sustainable development as well, because I'm also passionate about that issue, there are some great examples in Victoria of sustainable development. The Cape in East Gippsland is a fantastic example. Port Fairy recently announced that they will be having a sustainable development there. We should be working to attract these sorts of developers to our town so that we can have similar developments. You know, there's some great models that already exist. In regards to infill, I agree with Daniel 100%. If we want to revitalise our community and our CBD, we need to be looking at infill. And if you have a look at Nightingale, Ballarat, they're a fantastic example of how infill is going to increase the livability. So many people think of development as, you know, it's a detraction from the livability of Ballarat, but it actually has the ability to do the opposite. And we should be supporting more of that. You know, it pays respects to our heritage. And if you go and have a look at the design of Nightingale Ballarat, you see that it actually works with Ballarat's heritage. And we can't let arguments to say that, you know, development and infill works against our heritage when that's just not true. I'd also like to see council programs to encourage energy efficiency. One of the great things that we can do now is move towards electric homes. Moving away from the gas grid is a fantastic way to reduce emissions pretty quickly. But lots of people in the community don't understand this. Things like draft proofing your home, putting in insulation, these sorts of things that council can really play a role in, even just having an energy assessor that can come around to your house and give you the tips on how to save money and how to save on emissions. I'm halfway through the process of doing that to my own house. Sorry, Ange.
You're right.
So I'm really passionate about this, and anybody who wants to talk to me about those issues, I'd love to speak with you, because council, I really dispute that argument that council doesn't play a role here. We absolutely play a role in advocating for these issues.
Awesome, thank you. That wraps us up for the afternoon. I just want to say absolutely sincerely thank you to everybody for your generous responses and for really setting out what your vision looks like in a really positive way. I feel like I understand where all of you stand a whole lot better, and I'm really looking forward to sharing this video and the highlights with our Alliance group and to the rest of Ballarat. Really useful conversations, and I think a really massive opportunity for us to make some really interesting change here in Ballarat with you good people at the helm. Just a quick thank you to Tony and Sam for the backup tech. Always great to have a good team. And thank you to the Community Alliance gang. We are a motley crew, but we are passionate and pretty awesome, I think. And we're really grateful for the time you've all spent with us. So best of luck for the next couple of weeks, and you'll be seeing our faces again soon, hopefully. So thanks very much, everyone, and best wishes.
And we'll be playing the video just as everyone leaves, so chuck it on, Sam. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, I'm Lucy, and My Better Ballarat is a place that engages with our rich history and heritage in a way that's sustainable, creative, and encourages wider community pride.
My name is Sissy Austin. I'm a Gunditjmara Kira Warrong Djapurrung woman. I live here on Wadawurrung country in Ballarat. A progressive Ballarat council, to me, looks like a council that allows for the voices of young people to be heard.
My name is Hazel, and I am a member of the Ballarat Action Climate Co-op, which is a local group of high school students who are concerned about climate change and are taking action.
A council that avoids tokenism, that really looks at dismantling oppressive structures and then rebuilding it with Aboriginal people leading on the rebuilding of those structures.
My name is Matt Bridie, and I live in Wendouree, and I'm passionate about riding bikes.
I'm Neil Hybrids. One of the major issues needs to be rebuilding council's capability to manage its environmental assets.
I'm Sally Essing, and I live in Buninyong. What I'd like to see from Ballarat Council is a stronger commitment and stronger leadership in the area of climate change. And what I'd most like to see from Council is some leadership with the community on climate change.
Apparently I'm part of the minority. I'm not sure how I feel about that, because being a minority suggests maybe I'm of lesser value or not as important as those who are in the majority. I don't feel like I should be in the minority, because I work, I contribute, I pay my taxes, I use all the facilities, I have hopes, dreams, aspirations, views and opinions on what I want to see in my city. So I feel like an equal, and I feel I should be represented equally on the council.
Hi, I'm John.
Hi, I'm Kat. Personally, I'm really passionate and interested in the environment and ensuring that the environment remains in a good condition for future generations.
And something that I'm really passionate about is housing affordability and housing justice for all.
I'm Linda Genzer. I'm 78 years old and I was a poker machine addict and it almost ruined my life. It's been 14 years now since I've played the pokies or gambled. There are still times that I have nightmares of what will the candidates do to help people who are suffering from gambling harm to have something else to do and something to look forward to.